Northern England as well, maybe the odd heavy one too. Parts of southern Scotland also susceptible to some heavy showers, but I suspect any showers over Northern Ireland fading pretty quickly. A cool feel though with that breeze across the Northern Isles, temperatures only 10 or 11 Celsius at best through the afternoon. As we go through the evening and overnight, we should see the showers tending to fade away fairly rapidly through this evening. So some decent clear spells developing. Still a bit of a breeze, bringing a bit more cloud into East Anglia and potentially across into Kent also. But elsewhere, the wind's falling fairly light. Some mist and fog is possible. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across the north, double digits, certainly in urban areas further south to start tomorrow. And for most, tomorrow's looking like a fine day. It could start a bit cloudy over the southeast. The cloud will increase across the northwest. A bit of rain likely to trickle in here, but late in the day, again, a small chance of 1 or 2 showers, but most places will be fine tomorrow. Some lengthier spells of sunshine, feeling a bit warmer as well. The winds will be lighter and temperatures generally creeping up a little higher, or widely over 20 Celsius across the south. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In North Yorkshire, the A64 is partly blocked eastbound by an accident between junction 44 of the A1M and Tadcaster. It's taking around half an hour. And the queues towards there. In Warwickshire, the A46 is partly blocked northbound by an accident at the junction with Sandbarn Lane at Snitterfield, with the queues from Bishopton. In Suffolk, the A12 is partly blocked northbound by an accident just before the A14 Copdock interchange at Ipswich. It's taking roughly half an hour in 3 miles of queues towards there. On the M25 from Essex into Hertfordshire, there are long anti-clockwise delays from junction 27 for the M11, past 25 for the A10 because of roadworks. On the M26 in Kent, there are long westbound delays towards the M25 because of roadworks. And on the M25 in Surrey, 2 lanes are closed anti-clockwise after an accident between junctions 13 and 12 from Staines to the M3, causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
98-year-old veteran Ken Cook shared his memories of D-Day at a special event in Harrogate. As a former Green Howards private, Ken was part of an armada of vessels carrying more than 150,000 Allied soldiers to France. And he was just a teenager when his regiment landed on Gold Beach in Normandy.
Everybody was telling us, the officers and the sergeants, corporals, they're telling, get off the beach, lads, quick, because there's some more stuff coming behind us. And they had to get onto the beach as well. All our equipment and tanks and whatever, artillery, they were following up behind us. So we had to get out of the way and get into the countryside and make as much ground as we could on that first day.
Ken survived that harrowing first day, but many didn't. Around 10,000 Allied troops were either killed or injured. But their sacrifice, along with the bravery of those that lived, changed the course of history and resulted in the end of World War II.
Because somebody had to do it, and so we did it. We did our job, and that's it.
Ken is one of the last surviving members of York's Normandy veterans. Part of an ever-dwindling band of brothers who fought on D-Day, he's attending the 80th commemoration in France.
A very emotional occasion this time because there's not many of us left now.
Remembering the fallen, Ken's wish is that long after he's gone, we still never forget those who gave their tomorrow for our today.
The People's Channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Tuesday, the 18th of June. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So is Brexit in peril? Senior Tories warn that Brexit is at risk after Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves called for a reset of the UK's relationship with Brussels.
And isn't he extraordinary? Sir Ian McKellen, 85, rushed to hospital after falling off stage during a fight scene in the West End last night. They say he's going to make a full recovery and could even be back on stage tomorrow.
Boris versus Farage. The Conservatives are turning to Boris Johnson to combat the threat of Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Is that a good idea?
And breaking the rules, again, Gary Lineker seems to have smashed through the BBC guidelines by wearing his own range of menswear while presenting the Euros. Will the broadcaster take any action? I think we know the answer to that.
And trapped in Turkey, the family of a British pensioner claim they're being forced to pay £40,000 to free their father from a Turkish hospital after he fell ill on holiday. He didn't have travel insurance.
And we are going to have a discussion about that because he tried to get travel insurance and was turned down because he had got health issues.
Yeah, it's really...
It's tricky.
It's tricky. It's tempting if you think, well, I'll probably be all right. It's only a week in the sun.
Yeah.
And things go wrong. The bill can be enormous. GBNews.
And he was in a coma for 2 weeks in the hospital.
Poor thing, but, you know, it's difficult. We're going to talk to Simon Calder about that. GBNews.com/your say to let us know your thoughts this morning. First, though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election, which takes place in around 2 weeks' time. A social media campaign is urging first-time voters to ensure they're on the electoral roll. Celebrities, including the actor Michael Sheen, have lent their voices to the call. Recent figures show voter turnout among 25 to 34-year-olds has dropped sharply below 60%, according to the Resolution Foundation. Around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote in elections. The Labour Party says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 banking hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. Labour says it's part of its broader plan to revive Britain's high streets, which also includes cracking down on antisocial behaviour and support for small businesses. Consumer group Which says more than 6,000 bank branches have closed since 2015. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told GB News the hubs will bring banks back to the high street.
By sharing the costs of that premise, that's obviously a much lower cost to them than their individual bank branches. And what you see a lot of at the minute is banks exiting high streets. They don't want to be the last bank left on the high street because they think that will put them into a position where they won't be able, they'll be under undue pressure to keep that bank branch open. By coming together, delivering it in that way, it reflects how things have changed, but it keeps that essential service in there. And of course, high streets and town centres are changing, but they're still a really important part of people's local economy, their sense of identity in a place. We've got to do more to make sure they're vibrant places, centres of civic life, and access to financial services and banking services is a really important part of that.
And Sir Ian McKellen is said to be in good spirits after he fell off the stage during a performance in London's West End last night. The 85-year-old acting veteran was performing a fight scene in Player Kings at the Noel Coward Theatre when he lost his footing and stumbled off the stage. The theatre was evacuated while Sir Ian was taken to hospital, but he is expected to be back on stage tomorrow in time for another matinee performance. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning. It's 9:34. Is it only Tuesday?
Certainly is. 2 weeks and 2 days to the election. Counting the minutes.
Welcome.
Or the hours.
Yeah, 2 weeks and 2 days. That's gone quite quickly, actually. I thought we were going to have a long kind of 6-week run-in.
Well, the campaign used to be 3.5 weeks, but we somehow, I think about 2010, we got into a position where it's between 6 to 7 weeks. It's too long.
Do you think so?
Well, the French will do it much quicker. They've started later than us, and the first round of the presidential election will be over before ours.
Yeah, they do everything
it's incredible.
quicker than us, don't they?
People make their mind up, most people.
Yes, they have. Well, have they? I don't know. In fact, let us know this morning. Have you made your mind up? I still think there are a lot of people who don't quite know yet where to vote. I think there's a lot of floating voters.
Yeah, probably is.
Out there at the moment, just waiting for something to swing your decision may be. What might that be? gbnews.com/your say. Now, Sir Ian McKellen was taken to hospital last night after falling off a stage during a performance of Player Kings at the Noel Coward Theatre in London.
He is extraordinary, isn't he? He's 85. He's playing Falstaff, that great Shakespearean character from Henry IV, and he fell off stage during a fight scene when he lost his footing. The play's producers say he was in good spirits and is expecting to make a full and speedy recovery. You know, extraordinary, Beb. So, because of the election, I'm doing a bit of extra at Good Morning Britain. So each morning they whiz me here on a motorbike across London. It takes 14 minutes. I hadn't been on a motorbike since I was 15, and I actually fell off it when I was on a motorbike. It was my brother's motorbike. I didn't have a crash helmet on. Don't tell Mother! That's what my brother said. Don't worry about whether I got brain damage. But I was shocked to discover the guy who brings me over every day picks up 85-year-old Sir Ian McKellen from his place in Limehouse in East London, takes him to the theatre and then picks him up and takes him back. Extraordinary character. I can't imagine at the age of 85 getting on one of these roads, and they are big.
Yeah.
And they're powerful. And then he's on stage for 3 hours, Shakespeare.
Phenomenal.
Could you remember words for 3 hours?
That's the thing I find most impressive about that age and that job is the memory,
the retention,
lines.
Yeah, and he's on stage for most of that production.
Phenomenal. But it also just shows you, doesn't it, that if you keep your brain active, he's always learnt lines, and so he's exercised his brain like a muscle, and so he can still be cognitively that switched on and retain all that information. It's phenomenal.
And because it's him, the play's it's been on for 8 weeks, huge crowds, and apparently people often turn up outside with a poster of Gandalf the Grey, because he was the wizard in Lord of the Rings, and want him to sign the poster, and he says, have you been to see the show? If you've been to see the show, I'll sign your poster.
Does he?
Quite right.
I'm going to the theatre tonight, Andrew. I'm going to go see Drop the Dead Donkey at Richmond Theatre, which I have a feeling might be a little close to the bone. Apparently GB News does get quite a few mentions.
I'm sure it does.
I'll let you know.
Based in a newsroom, and I remember it from a few years ago, and one or two people who knew me said, I rather recognise your character in that Drop the Dead Donkey. Do you now?
I'm looking forward to it. Now, moving on, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has pledged to forge closer ties with the European Union if Labour wins the general election.
She wants to improve the UK-EU trade deal agreed by Boris Johnson's government in 2020. So
is Brexit in peril with a Labour government?
Well, let's talk to the former Labour advisor, Mike Buckley, and the former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Gentlemen, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Henry, can you explain what exactly it is that's causing people like you to have a fit of the vapours here? What is she saying she will do? Because, let's be honest, it wasn't a perfect trade deal that Boris struck when we left the European Union. Isn't she right to try and make things better?
Andrew, yes. Look, I think most sensible Brexiteers are absolutely comfortable with us having good relations and cooperation, collaboration with friendly states. There's no, that's a good thing, whether it's on trade or whether it's on security or anything else. But the problem with the European Union is that they have their structures, their mechanisms, their processes for achieving cooperation on just about every topic you can think of. And Rachel Reeves is talking about chemicals, trade in chemicals. She's talking about veterinary procedures or veterinary exchanges and so on. They've got all of the systems for this. But the problem is that if you want to be part of that, they require you to plug it into that system. And that system then requires you to be a rule taker. So you are therefore collaborating with somebody not any longer on a voluntary basis, but in a partnership, but as actually a subordinate element of an existing supranational set of rules.
I was going to say, Mike, that's the point, isn't it? We become, suddenly again, it looks like we're going to be rule takers, and that's why we left. We don't want 27 other countries meddling and telling us how to run our affairs. And that appears to be exactly what Rachel Reeves is going to sign up to.
Well, of course, when we were a member of the EU, we were not rule takers, we were rule makers, along with all the other constituent members of the EU. Now we're out of the European Union, things have got very, very difficult for business and industry here. It's much more expensive to trade. And of course, businesses producing here largely have to produce to EU standards anyway, because they want to sell into the EU, which is still our biggest market. So regardless of whether we're a member or not, or whether we have good trade relations, whether we don't, businesses, manufacturers here are still producing to EU standards because that's what they need to do if they want to sell their goods to people who want to buy them. What Rachel is talking about is the fact that The Brexit deal that we have, that Boris Johnson put together, is costing us about 4 to 5% of our productivity. So that makes us all poorer and makes the country poorer. In the end, harms public services and the ability of government to improve public services. So she's talking about making sensible measures to improve trading relationships. Nobody's talking about undoing Brexit. Labour's been very clear they're not going to rejoin the single market or the custom union or rejoin the EU, and they have no plans for that in the future either. On the specific of chemicals, there's a system called REACH, which is joined by, I think, all other European countries, EU and non-EU, and that regulates the standards for chemicals. Now, this has nothing to do with the EU. We did leave it when we left Brexit, but actually it isn't an EU system. It's just a European system. So we can rejoin REACH without having any impact on Brexit, because, as I say, it's got nothing to do with the EU, and its systems and structures and regulations are not set by the EU. So that's a very good example of something we can do that has had nothing to do with Brexit at all, but would make things significantly better for an industry that's actually very important for the UK economy.
Henry, I said at the beginning of the show that I think there are still a lot of people who are undecided where to place their vote, actually. And we're watching Labour do what might be described as the Ming vase run into the election, which is every interview they're trying not to smash the potential victory on the horizon. This issue is so controversial that this could be, whether we go back into the EU or not, could be one of those issues which affects people's votes. Do you think the electorate are hyper-vigilant when it comes to the EU and what the plan might be from Labour?
I think they're concerned. A lot of people are concerned, but they don't really understand it because it is quite complex. And, you know, in a 5-minute programme, 10-minute interview, whatever, it's very difficult to explain it. I was chief planner for EU Common Security and Defence Policy in Brussels for 3 years. And Labour is also talking about a security and defence pact with the European Union. I can tell you, as somebody who planned the development of EU common security and defence policy, that is simply impossible unless you enter into, under the Lisbon Treaty, there's an element there that requires the member states to coordinate their foreign and defence policy. We would absolutely have to be part of that mechanism. And that then places a severe constraint. And I don't care whether Labour says otherwise. I know that's the case because I was part of the planning for it. If Labour brings us into a pact with the European Union, we are going to have to do that, and that means that we lose autonomy in many respects regarding our policy, foreign policy and defence policy, including deployments. We've just had the anniversary of the surrender of the Argentinian forces in the Falkland Islands. I, as a former EU defence and security planner, would say to you, I would doubt very much that we would be able to launch Operation Corporate, which was the taking back of the Falkland Islands, if we were part of that framework that now exists. It didn't exist in '82. So these are the sort of things that I'm seriously concerned about. Also on immigration. Yes, I suspect, and Keir Starmer and the rest of the top team of the Labour Party are simply not going there and answering this question. Are you intending to stop the boats by joining the EU's Asylum and Immigration Pact? Because if so, the country needs to know that that's how you're going to do it, because you are going to open up the borders to those people who would otherwise come here by boat.
Sure, now, Mike, you're... sorry, Henry. Mike, last word to you, just to respond to that.
Well, I can guarantee that Labour will not give away our right to have autonomy in terms of security and defence or foreign policy. There's no chance of that. And were we to enter a security and defence agreement with them as a nation, we would, of course, do that as two sovereign equals and without that being given away. I mean, I do know that the EU are interested in a security and defence pact with the UK, and I believe that Labour have said clearly that they want to have that with the EU as well, but that will be on certain terms. But, of course, we are living in an uncertain world. And we are living in a world where the Conservatives have devalued and reduced our armed forces and our military capability over the last 14 years. So we do need to take action to keep the country safe, particularly given Russian aggression. And on asylum, I'm sure that Labour will come to a sensible agreement with the EU, which is the only way forward. I mean, clearly what Rishi Sunak has been trying for the last few years has got absolutely nowhere in terms of reducing boat numbers. In fact, they've gone up by about a third, I think, this year as compared to last year. So this problem has to be addressed because we're losing lives in the Channel. Smugglers are getting away with what they're getting away with. Labour will take action, but meaningful action, cooperation with the EU, again, as two sovereign equals, to address this problem. And I think we can all celebrate that.
OK. All right, gentlemen, it is a complex topic. Thank you so much for kicking us off on the show this morning. Former Labour advisor Mike Buckley and former leader of UKIP Henry Bolton. I just don't think Labour can say that they wouldn't take us back in.
They can't take us back into the EU, but they can take us back into a lot of the rules and regulations. And it's thin end of the wedge.
That's what I mean. I think particularly when it comes to migration
issue. Should forget that Keir Starmer was the architect of Labour's second referendum plan. So to hell with the fact we voted to leave. No, he wanted a second referendum.
Yeah.
We shouldn't forget it. He was the Brexit spokesman in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet, and that was his policy.
And never underestimate the influence of Tony Blair behind the scenes. We know what Tony Blair wants the world to look like. Right, up next.
The whole time.
A British grandfather is trapped in a Turkish hospital with an unpaid bill of £41,000 after falling ill on holiday. He did not have travel insurance. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight, weekends from 9 p.m.
England's new patron saint, Gary Lineker, a man holier and more virtuous than Mother Teresa and Gandhi combined, strikes again. Never one to miss the chance of some moral posturing, goal-hanging PR opportunist Lineker has spoken out about tonight's Champions League final. He tweeted the following: "This is the first time I'll be cheering for Real Madrid in a Champions League final." The German side Dortmund have signed a 3-year sponsorship deal with weapons manufacturer Rheinmetall. Now, Gary Lineker is not a stupid person. Following a stellar career on the pitch, it was a storied transition to broadcasting. And let me tell you, he's worth every penny of that £1.3 million a year of licence fee payers' cash to introduce football clips. So how did it escape the attention of this bright man that our democracies and our freedoms are protected and defended by the weapons produced like companies such as Rheinmetall? In fact, we should big up, not cancel, Rheinmetall, who have produced some of the armaments which are now helping Ukraine. Well, I'm very confused because I thought Gary Lineker was very supportive of Ukraine and their battle for survival. But now he wants to take their weapons away. I'm very, very confused. After all, they're going to need weapons with which to defend themselves. They can't fight by sending off tweets like Gary does. Now, many people love Gary Lineker. He has over 8 million followers on Twitter. This idol of the progressive left battled HMRC in court to reduce his tax bill by almost £5 million. This latest Lineker rant about war is weapons-grade nonsense. Sorry, Gary, but you're firing blanks.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 9:50 almost. You've been getting in touch at home, gbnews.com/your say. Adrian, who is a GB News member, thank you, Adrian, says Labour will take us back into the EU in all but name. The lefties will make sure of that. It will be an open-door policy in asylum seekers coming here.
And if we do sign up to any common asylum policy with the EU, they will then dictate how many we have to take.
Hungary have got an interesting situation at the moment whereby Viktor Orban is being told he has to take a certain number of migrants. He's being fined $1 million a day.
But
euros.
Don't pay the fine would be my view.
Yeah.
He's the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
But see, that's... I know people say, oh, Brexit hasn't worked. Look, we don't get these diktats from Brussels telling us how many we can and can't take. And And look at the vote last weekend in the European Parliament elections. Massive vote against the establishment.
I've never been happier to be out of the EU than I am at the moment. Keep your messages coming, won't you? Now, a British grandfather who fell into a coma whilst on holiday is being held hostage, according to his family, by a Turkish hospital until he's paid his £41,000 medical bill.
So Malcolm Stocker, who's 68, he's a retired pub landlord from Weymouth, was denied medical insurance for the holiday, but he decided to go anyway. Let's talk to the travel journalist Simon Calder. Simon, morning to you.
Good morning from beautiful Macclesfield, where I'm living the dream once again. Anyway, very nice to see you both.
You have such an exotic life.
This is a terrible story of Malcolm.
Yeah, I mean, Simon, is this a modern...
Terrible story of Malcolm. So there he is. He goes on holiday. He doesn't take out travel insurance, even though he's got pre-existing medical conditions. One report I saw said that he'd actually not been able to get insurance. I find that quite surprising, because actually travel insurance, anybody can get travel insurance. You just might not like the price of the policy. So he fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the global health insurance card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs, and the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
It's tempting, though, isn't it, Simon? Well, I'm just looking. There was a message from one of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe, and only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
If we could ask you as well, probably a lot of us have forgotten about the lost Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. Disappeared 10 years ago. Nobody, a complete mystery. Apparently, underwater microphones, Simon, have picked up a 6-second signal off the Australian coast. Are we close to getting to solving this mystery?
I think we might be, and this is an extraordinary piece of research by a British researcher, which basically realised that if you've got a 200-ton aircraft, this Boeing 777, which very sadly disappeared in 2014 with 239 people aboard somewhere over the Indian Ocean, he realised that that is actually going to make quite a noise. And there are, unbelievably, these so-called hydrophones, underwater microphones, and they are designed to make sure that people are abiding by the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. He reckons that he's picked up a 6-second burst of sound, which could be MH370 plunging into the Indian Ocean. He knows which one it is, and that could help the investigators narrow down the search area and at last...
Extraordinary.
Amazing.
Sorry we had to cut you off, Simon. I could listen to Simon Calder talk all day. We've run out of time.
He's such an...
Here's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, a fine day today. There will be a few showers around, but many places won't see them and stay dry. Also, just a little bit of rain working its way up towards Kent, so we could see some rain here for a time, particularly later this morning. A scattering of showers already across Scotland, one or two more developing through the day over northern England, perhaps Northern Ireland, maybe down into the Midlands. But I say they'll be somewhat hit and miss. Many places will stay dry, certainly across Wales and southwest England, dry and fine. And here 21, maybe 22 degrees Celsius. Cooler further north, temperatures struggling a little bit in the teens with the breeze still coming down from the north. Now the patchy rain across parts of Kent might just graze into parts of East Anglia, should scoot away through the afternoon. So turning brighter here to end the day. Still a few showers scattered across the Midlands, drifting south over northern England as well. Maybe the odd heavy one too. Parts of southern Scotland also susceptible to some heavy showers, but I suspect any showers over Northern Ireland fading pretty quickly. A cool feel though with that breeze across the Northern Isles. Temperatures only 10 or 11 Celsius at best through the afternoon. As we go through the evening and overnight, we should see the showers tending to fade away fairly rapidly through this evening. So some decent clear spells developing. Still a bit of a breeze, bringing a bit more cloud into East Anglia and potentially across into Kent also. But elsewhere, the wind's falling fairly light. Some mist and fog is possible. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across the north, double digits, certainly in urban areas further south to start tomorrow. And for most, tomorrow's looking like a fine day. It could start a bit cloudy over the southeast. The cloud will increase across the northwest. A bit of rain likely to trickle in here, but late in the day, again, a small chance of one or two showers, but most places will be fine tomorrow. Some lengthier spells of sunshine, feeling a bit warmer as well. The winds will be lighter and temperatures generally creeping up a little higher, or widely over 20 Celsius across the south. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Delays are possible to some CalMac Inner Hebrides sailings this morning because of an operational incident. In North Yorkshire, the A64 is closed eastbound from junction 44 of the A1M to Tadcaster after an accident, but long delays towards there. In Warwickshire, the A46 is partly blocked northbound by an accident at Snitterfield with queues from Bishopton. In Suffolk, the A12 is partly blocked northbound by an accident just before the A14 at the Copdock interchange at Ipswich. It's taking around half an hour in queues from Capel St Mary. On the M25 in Surrey, there are 2 out of 5 lanes closed anti-clockwise after an accident between junctions 13 and 12 from Staines to the M3, causing roughly 3 miles of queues. And in Dorset, the A338 is closed eastbound along Wessex Way west of Bournemouth after an accident with queues towards there and delays through Bournemouth as you divert. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular. And have we got a prize for you? First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. So you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's midday. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have saved Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 18th of June. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
He's 85, Sir Ian McKellen. He's a national treasure, rushed to hospital after he fell off stage during a fight scene in the West End last night. Get this, he's expected to make a full recovery and could even be back on stage tomorrow.
And backing British banks, Labour have pledged to bring back banks to the high street with a promise of 350 banking hubs over 5 years.
Breaking the rules? Who are we talking about? Yeah, Gary Lineker again, of course. He appears to have smashed BBC guidelines by wearing his own range of menswear while presenting the Euros. Do you think the broadcasters can do anything about it?
And missing MH370 mystery. A newly detected sound signal could finally solve the mystery of the plane that went missing 10 years ago.
And doctors are calling for the drink-drive limit to be cut to 1 beer or single glass of wine. Is it time, actually, to ban alcohol behind the wheel altogether? He's a shocker, Lineker. Rules don't apply to him, do they? He gets away with what he likes every day. The Telegraph have done it today. They've got his T-shirts, his trousers. They're all stuff he's being paid to promote by, did we say the retail chain? Next. It's an outrage. It drives a coach and horses through guidelines because effectively he's getting an endorsement worldwide.
Well, we probably wouldn't know unless we were talking about it, to be fair. I just think, you know, he hasn't got... the thing is with sportsmen, if you're covered in, like, Adidas, Carrymore, Nike, that's against the BBC rules. He would say there's no logo on there, so maybe it doesn't matter. He's just wearing a green T-shirt.
He's just making even more money.
You're harsh, Andrew Pearce.
He just takes the mick out of us. Good on Nigel Farage in his reform manifesto, say get rid of that TV licence.
Yeah.
Why should our TV licence pay for flipping Gary Lineker's overinflated football commentary and his next outfits?
One of the many things in that contract, not manifesto, that Reform announced yesterday. Right, a lot more to come this morning. gbnews.com/your say. First, though, here's Tatiana with your news.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election, which takes place in around 2 weeks' time. A social media campaign is urging first-time voters to ensure they're on the electoral roll. Celebrities, including the actor Michael Sheen, have lent their voices to the call. Recent figures show voter turnout among 25 to 34-year-olds has dropped sharply below 60%, according to the Resolution Foundation. Around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote in elections. Labour says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 new hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. The party says it's part of a broader plan to revive Britain's high streets, which also includes cracking down on antisocial behaviour and support for small businesses. Consumer group Which says more than 6,000 branches have closed since 2015. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told GB News the hubs will address the changing role of the high street.
By sharing the costs of that premise, that's obviously a much lower cost to them than their individual bank branches. And what you see a lot of at the minute is banks exiting high streets. They don't want to be the last bank left on the high street because they think that will put them into a position where they won't be able, they'll be under undue pressure to keep that bank branch open. By coming together, delivering it in that way, it reflects how things have changed, but it keeps that essential service in there. And of course, high streets and town centres are changing, but they're still a really important part of people's local economy, their sense of identity in a place. We've got to do more to make sure they're vibrant places, centres of civic life, and access to financial services and banking services is a really important part of that.
The Prime Minister will continue his election campaign in the southwest of England today, reaffirming an increase to the farming budget. It would see £1 billion dedicated to farming communities, with a pledge to continue inheritance tax relief. The Conservatives are accusing Labour of having a secret plan to abolish the exemption after it wasn't included in the party's manifesto. Farming Minister Mark Spencer told GB News that tax relief is important for farmers.
One of those challenges that they face is how they then pass that down the generations without being overtaxed. So one of the commitments we're making is not to increase or to introduce inheritance tax on agricultural holdings, so that those family farms can be passed down the generation, so they can carry on with their family expertise in producing food and managing our landscapes. And interesting that other political parties seem reluctant to rule out those sorts of tax increases to those family farms, and certainly we're calling on those other political parties, especially the Labour Party, to rule that out, and they seem reluctant to do that at this moment in time.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million a year to tackle sewage dumping by water companies. New water quality inspectors would work as part of the newly created Clean Water Authority, which would have powers to forcibly enter sites if water companies are too slow to grant permissions. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davies, says the companies have been allowed to mark their own homework, which he called a national scandal. More than 1,000 steelworkers start industrial action today over the closure of a furnace in Port Talbot. Members of the Unite union working for Tata Steel will observe an overtime ban and work to rule, which means they'll refuse tasks that are optional in their contracts. Tata says the industrial action is unlawful and it's offered workers what it calls generous redundancy packages. International news now to North Korea, where the Russian president is due to arrive for his first state visit in 24 years. Vladimir Putin travelled through the north of Russia early this morning, where he's due to continue his journey to Pyongyang. He's to hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine. In a letter published by North Korea's state media, Mr. Putin promised to build trade and security systems with the isolated country that are, quote, not controlled by the West. And Sir Ian McKellen is said to be in good spirits after he fell off the stage during a performance in London's West End last night. The 85-year-old acting veteran was performing a fight scene in Player Kings at the Noel Coward Theatre when he lost his footing and tumbled off the stage. The theatre was evacuated while Sir Ian was taken to hospital. He's expected to be back on stage tomorrow in time for another matinee performance. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
10:07. Britain's News on GB News. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thank you for getting in touch this morning. You know this Labour bringing back the banks story?
Well,
what a load of rubbish.
In a form.
Yeah, so the idea is they're going to have these banking hubs. That's not bringing back banks. That's having like a lorry that will drive into your village for one day a week, where you've got to be there to fill out your paperwork. Right. You know what they could do if they really wanted to keep banks is just say, we commit to never having a cashless society. If Keir Starmer said, we will always have cash, then we will always need to have banks because people would have to take the cash. He won't say that, and he definitely won't say that because Tony Blair is absolutely on board that we're not having that. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Yeah, well, as you know, Tony Blair speaks a lot to Keir Starmer. Hence why people think they're going to slide and slide and slide on Brexit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Blair thinks Brexit was the worst thing that ever happened to this country.
There's a lot that I just feel is going on behind the scenes in Labour that they're not being completely frank and honest with us about. I really do. You have all been getting in touch at home. Tug has said that Labour plan is simply so once in power, they have more control over your money. You can almost guarantee they have control plans already in place to control those banks. Exactly, Tug. That's what we've just kind of been saying. And Malcolm says, do banking hubs not already exist? Leslie has replied on our comments page saying, yes, they do. We have one in our village. Dickie has said, yes, the Tories have already set up 75 of these banking hubs. Yet more proof they're one of the same. This isn't a new policy. I can totally understand why Labour have announced it, but it isn't going to offer to you what you think it is, which is to keep your banking service on your high streets.
And so many banks are disappearing. They're just vanishing all over the place because they want people to go online and they want people to give up their checkbooks. I'm not giving up my checkbook. I know I'm old-fashioned. And they want me to give up cash.
And you know,
I've got cash in my pocket, and I've got my checkbook in my bag.
And Anurin has got in touch this morning, good morning, saying how much will Labour pay the banks out of our tax money to encourage them to put the promised banking hubs back in town? You can't just tell a private business, you've got to do this, we insist you do it.
I think perhaps Labour think they can, and that's the difference.
You can't. You can't tell. The state should not be telling business or individuals what to do.
And if they run the hub at a big loss, they'll pass that cost on to their customers.
Of course they will.
Now,
right, go on.
A couple of weeks ago, was it last week, in fact, wasn't it? Was it 2 weeks ago? The 80th anniversary of D-Day, as we remembered the debt we owe our war heroes. But are our veterans supported today? And we've got this general election going on. Are the veterans getting support?
So the charity Help for Heroes say that no party's manifesto goes far enough, and they've called on leaders to sign their pledge.
So let's hear more about this pledge from the Chief Executive of the organisation, James Needham. James, morning to you. I think your organisation does great work for an often forgotten part of society, our veterans. And I was at a garden party recently, and I met some of the older ones, and you just feel humble when you're in their presence. And in this election, the only time we've really heard about the veterans was D-Day, and because of the Prime Minister's reckless decision to leave the D-Day commemorations early. But I don't think we've heard very much more about what any of the main political parties say they're going to do for veterans.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that, firstly, about our charity, Andrew. And I agree with you, actually. I think we have got a group of veterans who are somewhat out of sight and out of mind. And this is our opportunity as a charity to say, veterans, the armed forces community really matters. Here's our view on what we think is important, and to really set that out. So we're calling on all political parties to sign up to our Veterans Pledge. That pledge is about three things, and we've distilled it to try and make this really simple and accessible. We've distilled that to maintaining the Office of Veterans Affairs, led by a Cabinet attending minister. We'd like to see an independent review into the medical discharge process. And ultimately, we believe we want some firm commitments around making sure the unfair barriers don't stand in the way of benefits and compensation for those who deserve it. So that's the pledge. That's what we're asking all parties to sign up to. No one has yet done it. So I think I'd say to any viewers, if a campaigner knocks on your door, or if you're in touch with your local parties, do please ask them the question if they've signed up to the Help for Heroes pledge, and ask them what they will do to support our armed forces community. That's the most important message here.
James, just elaborate a little bit on that review of the medical discharge process. What's currently wrong with it?
Yeah, it's really important, Beth, to frame this, to just frame this. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute, because we talk about veterans. I mean, there's over 2 million veterans in this country. Oh, really? The armed forces community is probably 6 million strong. But there is a small group of people who are medically discharged, and it's about 1,500 people a year. And their experiences, I mean, and we represent mostly those that are stepping forward, seeking support from us, are from this community. And they are often, something has happened, some traumatic incident or experience has happened, and they found themselves leaving service very quickly. And by very quickly, I do mean very quickly, and it's hugely variable. They leave sometimes without knowing, often in fact without knowing what their compensation might look like, without knowing what their plan is, and without sometimes having the time to consider how they transition well back into society. And I think we'd agree service is a unique occupational experience. And so however that concludes, that can be a challenging time for those leaving service. When something's happened and you're leaving quickly, that's a really difficult time, and in and of itself causes a huge amount of harm and anxiety. So we hear testimony time and time again from this group, and we believe that process, just whether it's the process that's not working or the application of that policy, something's not right. That's what we sense, that's what we see, and we believe the next government could make a really big difference by commissioning an independent review on that to really bring forward all of that evidence and testimony.
Is that part of the reason, do you think, James, why so many veterans are homeless, sleeping rough, have drink problems and other drug-related problems? They've lived in a community for a long time, then they're thrust out of that community, and if they've not got a family, a lot of them end up in these poor, straitened circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that is a medical. I don't think that is, and certainly we don't hear evidence that is from a medical discharge process. I certainly think that transition can be very challenging, Andrew, for many people. And when you have joined, the Army's taught you to put your team first, to really put your own expectations and hopes on the back burner, work to the team, give everything that you have to king and country. I think when you leave that and you leave that experience, as I say, even normally, that is very difficult for people. And I think there's lots of military charities that do great work here. Ultimately, the important part is the next government really recognising the work, not just that we do, but the work more broadly, and sign up to the pledge and say, actually, these things are important. We recognise that. We'll sign on the dotted line.
OK. Fascinating. Thank you so much, Chief Executive of Help for Heroes, James Needham there. How interesting that you've got an organisation like that who's saying none of these parties are offering what our veterans need.
Yeah, and one of the defences made of Rishi Sunak leaving D-Day so early was that his ministers were saying nobody's done more for veterans. Well, they haven't even signed up to that pledge, have they?
No.
Which is a fundamental thing they could do. And we do have a veterans minister in the form of Johnny Mercer, who's an ex-military man. But again, it's just it's like the Cinderella, isn't it? They're behind the scenes, behind the stairs, and nobody's paying any attention. I think it's very sad.
Right, still to come this morning, doctors are calling for the drink-drive limit in England to be cut to 1 beer or a small glass of wine. Or maybe we should stop alcohol behind the wheel completely. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Almost half of those seeking to have an affair are happier with their job than with their primary relationship. But what exactly does a cheater do for a living?
Well, medical assistants and nurses, surprisingly, top the lists of professions for female cheaters. And it's jobs in IT or tech for male cheaters, which I think is less of a surprise.
No.
This is all according to a survey by the dating site Ashley Madison.
OK, so why do people cheat? To answer this, we're joined now by broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy.
Morning, Lucy.
So, is it OK of me to say naughty nurses in this day and age? Am I going to get cancelled for that?
You're out.
Yeah, I'm out.
Been cancelled.
See ya.
There's the door.
There we
But
go.
yes, you're talking about the caring professions, and I think it's very appropriate.
Surprised by that.
But women, well, because they're very nurturing, very loving, very giving, whereas the males who are in tech and IT, very strategic.
Is there a link between high-pressure jobs, maybe nurses infamously, you know, they're working long hours, underpaid, stressed out? Is there a link between jobs of that nature and cheating, maybe as a relief?
Absolutely. Is it just about sex, or is it about emotional connection? Is it about emotional validation? And increasingly, people are discovering that their primary relationship is just not a place where they feel safe.
This survey found that personality didn't actually come into it that much. It was about half and half if you're an introvert or an extrovert that you'd be likely to have an affair.
I think that's right. And I think that just speaks to the fact that all people want to have a good emotional connection. So it doesn't matter whether you're really social or whether you're someone who has to recharge your batteries in private time, that actually we only ever want three things in life. We want to feel safe, we want to feel loved, but we also want to feel heard. And in increasingly a number of marriages and long-term relationships, we get into grooves, we get into ruts, and we stop hearing our partner, we stop listening to them, and they stop listening to us.
The People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
19, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pierce and Bev Turner.
Our panel are with us now. Luciana Berger is here and also Piers Pottinger. Good to see you both. Good morning. Luciana, let's start shall we, with EU fishing wars and the fact that Labour are going to walk us straight back into a closer relationship with the EU.
Oh, no.
Well, let's just take a step backwards and kind of examine where this has all come from. And firstly, I think it's important for the context of this conversation that we're going to say from the outset what Labour's been very, very clear about. It's been very, very clear that it's not looking to reopen the wounds of the past. It's committed to making Brexit work. It has some very strong red lines. The Labour Party does not want to return to the single market. The Labour Party does not want to return to the customs
union. Well, they do, but they're just saying they won't.
They said that they call them red lines. They've been very, very clear. And they've also said we're not going to see a return to freedom of movement. I think it's really important that your viewers are aware of that, and the party's been very, very clear for a good number of years on that point. This discussion has really surfaced as a result of an interview from the Shadow Chancellor, where she was talking about what are very, very real issues for businesses in this country of the red tape, and specifically the challenges that the City of London faces, so our financial industry sector. It's really important for our economy, and when I meet them and chat to them, I hear firsthand about the challenges that we're facing and that we might lose our competitive edge, or we're starting to lose it, and we're losing people out of London to go work in other economic centres, particularly in Germany. And the other issue she talked about was about the chemicals industry. Now, I was formerly a Member of Parliament in Liverpool, and the chemicals sector there was really very, very important. It's a massive export sector for us here in the UK, and the sector's really struggling. Right. And they're really, really struggling because of this red tape. We are all paying the price of the increased cost of living crisis because of the red tape, with things coming in and out of this country, the increased checks. It's a real burden to business. I was at something called the Founders Forum last week, and hearing people that are creating businesses in this country, their frustration at having to spend money setting up additional offices in the European Union because of the additional burden and cost of business here in the UK. We should be, as much as possible, generating that growth, and it's about making those things easier. So interestingly, this story comes of what the EU are saying, and they can say whatever they want. What they would push for in the future, they can say whatever they'd like to push for. It doesn't mean we're going to see it in this country.
But these fishing waters appears totemic issue in the referendum campaign. We want to keep these Spanish fishermen out of our waters and the French fishermen, and now it seems that Labour are going to let them back in.
Well, Starmer and his bunch clearly have made a lot of noises about getting closer to Europe. And the only problem is that Europe looks like distancing itself further from Starmer, because it's going, if you look at what's happened with the French elections, you have the wonderful Georgia Meloni, Rishi's little squeeze, perhaps. Anyway, if you looked at her, she's certainly keener on him than Mr. Macron. And the EU's going the other way. So I think that it's all very well Starmer hinting at this, and I'm sure with Tony Blair in the background, who's obsessed with the EU, thinks it's wonderful. I actually think the best policy on it is Count Bindface, who suggests that EU countries might like to join the UK. As part of his manifesto, he would invite them to do so. I think it would be quite a good idea. Turn it the other way around. But fishing is absolutely a fundamental right for our fishermen around. We are an island surrounded by sea, and fishing is an absolutely vital industry for this country. And of course, the EU will do their best to get as many fish off us as they can. I mean, in Madrid, the capital of Spain, the most landlocked European capital, the furthest from the sea, they eat more fish and seafood, British fish and seafood, I may say, than any other country in Europe. But I mean, I'm sorry, this again is a bit of a, dare I say it, red herring.
Red herring. I knew that was coming.
The real issues are much more about Starmer. And of course, I'm afraid I disagree with Luciana there, because the Labour Party are going to introduce so much more red tape, so much more regulation, because all they want to do is control us like the communists they really are.
Oh, come on.
It's going to be very, very disastrous when Labour get in. And the British public, when they see what Starmer starts doing for real, rather than all this wishy-washy manifesto where they don't answer any of the questions because they're scared to, because when people realise what Labour are really planning, they'll be terrified and horrified they voted them in.
Well, listen, we've seen 14 years of Tory chaos. 14 years of it. And we are paying the highest levels of tax in this country in 70 years. And we are all paying the cost via either our mortgages, we're all paying so much more in terms of like our weekly food bills. I think, this country is crying out for change and desperately needs it. And that's what the Labour Party
change is there. I mean, it's clear. It's Nigel Farage. I mean, he has...
Oh, you can't take what he's presenting seriously.
Yesterday, it was a breath of fresh air because he talked sense, he talked straightforwardly.
But not realistically costed.
People's questions.
But nothing was realistically costed. But he would admit that.
People don't care about that. If you read, for example, the Times today makes a very good point in their leader page. They say Farage's fans don't care if it doesn't add up.
No.
Because actually what they care about are the big issues which Farage is so strong on, namely immigration. And defence, and also generating prosperity and growth. The Labour Party manifesto has absolutely nothing to generate any kind of growth or prosperity. The Labour Party hates prosperity.
Okay.
It trades on poverty.
Well, let's bring...
So there's a few things to say. I mean, you cannot be a credible alternative in this country if you don't set out an economic plan which is fully costed, which Nigel Farage essentially admitted yesterday was the case.
But he does say he knows he can't form the next government. He's thinking about 5 years' time.
Indeed, but
so this is an aspiration.
But the overwhelming majority of people in this country, when they vote, do look at economic credibility, and on every single measure, what was set out yesterday fails. And even Nigel Farage himself, admits that. And you can be as ambitious as you want, but if it's not realistic and if it's not going to deliver, then it doesn't mean anything. In terms of what the Labour Party is offering, the Labour Party has been consistent in saying, like, we have seen flatlining growth in this country, we've seen stagflation, we've seen no growth whatsoever, and unless we have this growth in this country, we cannot achieve the things that will make such a difference to people up and down the country, whether it's contending or tackling with the cost of living crisis, which I know is really, really significant for the majority of your viewers. But whether it's the creation, for example, of a £7.3 billion national investment fund, a sovereign wealth fund. Many other countries have them. We don't have one. Why don't we have one? I think it's really important that the Labour Party is setting that out and talking about the 600,000 plus jobs that will create as a result of it. Again, we've got a massive challenge with employment in this country. We've got fewer people that are economically active than since before the start of the pandemic. And it's the Labour Party that's setting out really ambitious and bold plans, creating great British energy. So in the wake of geopolitical issues like we've seen from Ukraine, you can laugh. Who's paying energy bills up and down this country? I don't think the viewers watching this will find that very, very funny.
Why are you laughing at Great British Energy?
Of course, is being run by that great loser, Ed Miliband. I mean, who's a complete farce and noticeably being kept very much as far away from the airwaves as possible.
He was all over the airwaves
because he's a loser, and the general public all know Miliband is a loser. As for GB Energy, what is it actually? It's not going to do anything. It's just a quango that's going to cost the taxpayer a huge amount of money. And again, it's Labour coming up with fanciful stuff that is more bureaucracy, more legislation, and more cost for the taxpayer.
I have to challenge that. Please forgive me, but it's just this is just nonsense. Okay, we import so much energy in this country when we could and should be creating it ourselves. We should be harnessing as an island so much more power that comes from the wind and the sun.
Do you want a wind turbine farm near where you live?
I'd welcome any form of renewable energy, which means I don't have to pay for it. Right, absolutely.
Right. The Labour Party is going to tax all the energy companies to stop.
I'm sorry to interrupt you guys. We have to, first of all, we mentioned Count Binface, so we have to give you the candidates for Richmond and North Allerton. Jason Barnett, Independent. Count Binface. Daniel Callaghan, Liberal Democrats. Angie Campion, Independent. Louise Dickens, Workers' Party of Britain. Kevin Foster Green. Rio Goldhammer, the Yorkshire Party, Nico Omilana, Independent, Brian Richmond, Independent, Sir Archibald Stanton, Monster Raving Looney Party, Rishi Sunak, Conservative, and Lee Taylor for Reform UK, Tom Wilson for Labour.
Yeah. Breaking news. Police have issued an urgent appeal to help locate 3 young missing children in Surrey. They're Candy, 14, Amelia, 9 and Malik, 7, who reported missing after 7 o'clock yesterday. All 3 were last seen walking towards Staines town centre. Police said they may have travelled to London. Oh dear.
Yeah. So if you're watching on TV, we're looking for those 3 children, 14, 9, and.
But can we just talk very briefly about Ascot, Piers, because you've got a hunch that there might be a rather important visitor at Ascot.
Well, I think the clue is in one of the races, which is the King Charles III Stakes.
Is that today?
That's today. And it's a relatively new race, obviously, because and it's a Group 1. Today is the best racing day for purists in the week. It's got 3 Group 1s, and I'm sure Prince Charles will be there today.
To present
and
the prize.
I suspect he'll be there on Thursday to present the Gold Cup, as the monarch traditionally presents the Gold Cup.
OK, Luciana Pearce, thank you so much for now. It's the news headlines, though, with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election, which takes place in around 2 weeks' time. A social media campaign is urging first-time voters to ensure they're on the electoral roll. Figures from the Resolution Foundation show turnout among younger voters has dropped sharply below 60%, while around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote. Labour says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 new banking hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. Consumer group Which says more than 6,000 branches have closed since 2015. The Prime Minister will continue his election campaign in the southwest of England today, reaffirming an increase to the farming budget. It would see £1 billion dedicated to farming communities, with a pledge to continue inheritance tax relief. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million a year to tackle sewage dumping by water companies. New water quality inspectors would work as part of the newly created Clean Water Authority, which would have powers to forcibly enter sites if water companies are too slow to grant permissions. And the Russian president is due to arrive in North Korea for his first state visit in 24 years. Vladimir Putin travelled through the north of Russia early this morning, where he's due to continue his journey to Pyongyang. He'll hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2685 and 1.1830 euros. The price of gold is £1,824 and 18 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,175 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Right, still to come, would you like people at work to be able to spot the signs of stress, burnout, anxiety and depression? Maybe your immediate colleagues cause these issues.
I've been complaining about it. Well, I didn't used to be grey until I worked alongside Bev Turner.
Find out why it could soon be a reality. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Delays are possible to Calmac Inner Hebrides sailings because of an operational incident in County Durham. The A66 is partly blocked eastbound by an accident on Stockton Road, heading out of Darlington, just after the Great Burden roundabout, causing delays. In Greater Manchester, the A56 is closed southbound along Manchester Road in Bury after an accident with delays there too. Buses replaced trains between Corby and Kettering because of an incident. There are delays of up to 50 minutes, with some cancelled trains into and out of St Pancras Station in London through Leagrave, where there's an incident. In Essex, the A134 is blocked southbound along Wildeve Avenue in Colchester, causing delays. On the M26 in Kent, there are westbound queues onto the M25 because of roadworks, and Gatwick Express train services are suspended because of a signalling problem. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing we've got is obviously D-Day, which was so moving that I think everybody was crying. You see these wonderful old people who gave their lives, and they were crying to remember it all. You see tears in the King's eyes. You saw Camilla, the Queen, crying. And I think, gosh, you know, actually Britain's maybe opening up, and we're not sort of stiff upper lip all the time anymore. I think that William was so dignified.
Oh, he's amazing, isn't he?
And he was the young king. And I thought he was brilliant. He must have been heartbroken that he couldn't have his wife with him. And one of the people who knocks us on the head now and then is Harry. He got the green light to appeal to the appeal. It's a third one, and he wants to make sure that the government gives him protection all the time, automatically. One of the reasons is that he's going away with Meghan for a tour, world tour, which made my heart sort of pump, because this is going to be another copy of what the royal family is like. And he wants to be covered. Well, it's not on our tax, frankly.
So the British public would pay for this?
Yes, yes. It's a joke, isn't it? And he also said he wanted it all done by the end of the month, June, and the judge said he doesn't deserve that. He's not in that VIP category. So he was sort of put in his place, but I don't think he can believe that. And the other thing is the wonderful wedding yesterday. And one of the things I loved, there was a wedding dress, but also I loved the blue velvet shoes. William again was wonderful.
Yeah.
He was absolutely wonderful. He was ushering everyone around, which seems funny for an heir to the throne, and actually would jump in the bus that was taking them to the celebration.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back, it's 10:36. Now, we love hearing your thoughts at home and what you're thinking about as we run up to the election here at GB News.
So today, we're going to
Greatest
Manchester.
city in the world.
Hi, I'm Cyan Astley and I live in South Manchester. So the most important issue for me in the upcoming general election is that the next government sort out and get stability in housing, property and the economy. I work as a landlord and I have done for 25 years, and it's just a mess at the minute. So as a voter in South Manchester, I have floated between the Lib Dems and Labour, and those are your choices in South Manchester. The Conservatives never get in this area, don't stand a chance. On a national level, the Conservatives, for me as a landlord and a property owner, have been unbelievably disappointing. I think they've been disappointing for landlords and tenants, to be honest. They have not got their act together. What they've promised hasn't materialised. They've chopped and changed their mind. They haven't followed through on their promises. They've made it confusing for everybody. So they've been useless, actually, on every front. The problem is, as landlords who had traditionally been supported by the Conservative Party, when Labour get in, you think, oh God, because they talk about rent controls, they talk about the fact that they don't like landlords. Landlords have got a really bad rap, so it makes me really nervous. So it's quite confusing, and I just... Who do you vote for? As somebody that owns property, I really don't know who to vote for, because I don't know who will be the worst. And that's not to say I don't know who will be the best, because I don't think either of them will be good.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
I love a woman with a saw.
But, you know, there's this idea that landlords are all rogues and they're big and wicked and they've got hundreds and hundreds of properties. Most landlords own 2 properties. And they're good landlords and they respond to their tenants. That woman, conscientious, and getting screwed over by all of them.
Yeah, it does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the idea that getting a place to rent out might not be a way of investing your money anymore.
And if they then sell the property, it'll be bought up by a big company, which means the choice is restricted and the rents will go up. That's what will happen.
That's exactly what's happening. And I thought what was so interesting there was this idea that I don't want to really vote for either of the major parties, because I just don't know where to put my vote.
Well, and that's, of course, what Reform is tapping into, isn't it?
Yeah.
A sense of disenfranchisement with the main political party and the Lib Dems as well.
Yeah.
And so vote for us, because we are doing it differently.
Andrew and I were actually just looking at a fantastic article in the Daily Telegraph written by Janet Daly, and she talks about the fact that it feels there's neither of the 2 main parties are being honest about why we are where we are and relating it to events of the pandemic, in terms of money printing, inflation, and also the war in Ukraine, energy prices. They're all ignoring the elephant in the room.
She's also saying, in Janet Daly's pithy terms, I've known Janet for a very long time, she's saying that effectively we hate the main political parties.
Yeah.
And she's recusing Reform. She said they should be renamed Revenge.
Yeah.
Because you hear Richard Tice saying he wants to destroy the Tories.
That's right. And she says this about the fact that Labour is a blunt instrument with which to hit the Conservatives. That's how it feels to a lot of people. And there's so much exasperation and anger and rage out there and frustration that, just like our GB News viewer landlady there, we don't want to necessarily... People feel, I don't necessarily want to vote for the Conservatives, what we've been through. I don't necessarily want to vote for Labour because they didn't hold them to account during that period of time. So where do I place my vote? I still think there's a lot of people who haven't decided.
Yeah, possibly. Well, and of course that's what the Tories are clinging to.
Yeah.
But whether anybody's listening to them... So, but anyway, more manifestos. It's like a London bus, isn't it? You wait for one. There's 6 come along. So we had the manifesto launch yesterday in Merthyr Tydfil for Reform. Scottish Labour are about to launch their manifesto in Edinburgh, but we're going to see what's happening for the other parties on the campaign trail.
We're joined by our political editor, Christopher Hope, and our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you both. Olivia, if we've got your signal, I'm not sure whether your screen has frozen there. Chris, let's go to you while we reconnect to Olivia. Chris, where are you and what's happening?
Well, morning, Andrew. Morning, Bev. Yeah, I'm in North Devon, rolling through the beautiful North Devon countryside. We're on the way to meet some fishermen with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and then also a Q&A, question and answer, with farmers. The Tory party is pushing today their support for farmers. They say that if you vote Tory at the election on the 4th of July, the next Tory government will protect the rights of farmers not to pay more inheritance tax when they leave their farms to other people in their family. They say Labour can't offer that same guarantee. So it's a protection for farmers is the idea being pushed today by Rishi Sunak. He may not want to talk about the blonde bombshell, Boris Johnson, who the Telegraph report is looking to see how he can help the Tory party with its stuttering campaign to win support back from the Reform UK party by supporting individual candidates. And they need some support because the poll today from Delta Poll, a new poll, is alarming. A 4% jump, a 4-point jump for Reform to 16 points, just 3 points behind the Tories on 19. So there are lots of pollsters, but this one on Delta Poll has been quite bearish on support for Reform, but they are seeing the Farage effect really count, and that's the worry, I think, for the Tory party. How do they get those voters out from 2019 and vote again for the Tory party? And that's why some are saying, let's stand for Boris Johnson. I should say, though, that Mrs Johnson, Carrie Johnson, his wife, has posted a very timely photograph on Instagram overnight of the family on holiday in Sardinia. So I do wonder whether back at the Johnsons' house, whether Boris Johnson is saying, how can I help? And his wife saying, Boris, you're on holiday.
Very interesting. That's Chris Hope. Of course, that poll coming straight after the manifesto launch, which should give the parties political boost. Let's go to Olivia Utley, our political correspondent. Olivia, where are you? Who are you with?
I'm on the Labour battle bus. I'm somewhere between Bristol, where we've just been, heading towards the southeast of England. We're not being told exactly where for security reasons, so we're just going to turn up somewhere and find out. What Labour want to be talking about today is their 350 new banking hubs. Now, the idea behind that is that in countless high streets across the country, countless communities, banks have had to close down, and there has been nothing to replace them. So as us GB News presenters, reporters and viewers all know, there are lots and lots of people who rely on cash, who rely on physical banks, who are currently being really underserved. Now, this idea from Labour isn't new. The Conservatives have already talked about the idea of banking hubs, and actually they've set up about 50 banking hubs and have another 76 in the pipeline. Labour basically wants to turbocharge this idea and get their banks set up. This is a week where Labour is focusing as much as it possibly can on the economy. But of course, the press are asking about other issues. Keir Starmer is still facing questions about that two-child benefit cap. He's said so far that he can't commit to getting rid of that two-child benefit cap that was brought in by the Conservatives. That's meant a lot of pressure from the left of his party, who think it's essentially a Tory austerity measure and ends up with children being plunged into poverty simply because they have multiple siblings. At the moment, Keir Starmer, I spoke to him about it yesterday, is standing firm and saying that he can't commit to scrapping that cap. But I think that possibly in the next 2.5 weeks, with all this pressure from his backbench and possibly some pressure from the front bench too, we might begin to see a bit of movement on that. On fuel duty too, we're not quite sure what Labour's plan is. Wes Streeting has heavily implied that the fuel duty will remain frozen, but other cabinet ministers are suggesting that we can't rule out a possible rise in fuel duty. I think that might be a bit of a focal point for the campaign over the next few days as motorists try and get to the bottom of what Labour can offer for them.
OK, thank you, Olivia, from the Labour battle bus, and Chris there with the Conservatives. Thank you both. Right, up next, burnout and stress. Just two of the symptoms of working with Andrew Pearce. Our next guest will have some top tips.
I could sue over that.
You wouldn't sue. You're not that woke.
I'm not.
You know, our next guest is going to have some top tips for anyone struggling with their mental health at work. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, a fine day today. There will be a few showers around, but many places won't see them and stay dry. Also, just a little bit of rain working its way up towards Kent, so we could see some rain here for a time, particularly later this morning. A scattering of showers already across Scotland, and one or two more developing through the day over northern England, perhaps Northern Ireland, maybe down into the Midlands. But I say they'll be somewhat hit and miss. Many places will stay dry, certainly across Wales and southwest England, dry and fine. And here, 21, maybe 22 degrees Celsius. Cooler further north, temperatures struggling a little bit in the teens with the breeze still coming down from the north. Now, the patchy rain across parts of Kent might just graze into parts of East Anglia, should scoot away through the afternoon. So turning brighter here to end the day. Still a few showers scattered across the Midlands, drifting south over northern England as well. Maybe the odd heavy one too. Parts of southern Scotland also susceptible to some heavy showers, but I suspect any showers over Northern Ireland fading pretty quickly. A cool feel though with that breeze across the Northern Isles. Temperatures only 10 or 11 Celsius at best through the afternoon. As we go through the evening and overnight, we should see the showers tending to fade away fairly rapidly through this evening. So some decent clear spells developing. Still a bit of a breeze, bringing a bit more cloud into East Anglia and potentially across into Kent also. But elsewhere, the winds falling fairly light. Some mist and fog is possible. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across the north, double digits, certainly in urban areas further south to start tomorrow. And for most, tomorrow's looking like a fine day. It could start a bit cloudy over the southeast. The cloud will increase across the northwest. A bit of rain likely to trickle in here, but late in the day. Again, a small chance of one or two showers, but most places will be fine tomorrow. Some lengthier spells of sunshine, feeling a bit warmer as well. The winds will be lighter and temperatures generally creeping up a little higher, more widely over 20 Celsius across the south. Goodbye.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, we're all familiar with first aid in the workplace. But what about mental health first aid?
So there's now a new initiative to help businesses train staff to spot signs of stress, burnout or anxiety at work. So is this actually, we're catching up with what we should have been doing a long time ago? Or, as my mum or dad might have said, come on, just pull yourself together.
Let's talk now to the Director of Mental Health First Aid, Sarah McIntosh. Good morning, Sarah. I mean, we're having a bit of fun about this, that our colleagues can stress us out at work and we might have to spend time with people in the office that we don't want to. But where does it go into more serious territory that we should be aware of?
Thanks for having me on. It's really difficult. 1 in 4 of us will experience mental ill health every year. And so from a workplace perspective, that can range from just struggling with workload or experiencing anxiety and stress. Mental health first aiders are trained to spot the signs of someone who may be struggling with their mental health. And they're designed to open up a conversation with them about their mental health and well-being so they can understand what's happening to that person and signpost them appropriately to support and, where necessary, GPs, professional support, mental health support as well. And what we do know is the earlier that people have conversations around their mental health, the more successful their recovery will be, the quicker their recovery will be, and the more likely that their longer-term mental health outcomes are going to be positive as well.
Where do you get the figure 1 in 4 from, Sarah?
It's actually from the charity Mind and their research, so it's quite extensive research from our colleagues over in the Mind charity.
And so when you say, that interventions early are going to have a better outcome, that makes complete sense. But what a difficult conversation to have with somebody at work. Like, how do you broach that? Because some people could get quite prickly if you say, you just seem a bit down or you don't seem like yourself. Like, what would your advice be in terms of that initial contact?
Well, most people would welcome a conversation. I think if there are people who are more closed off or not wanting to open up a conversation, mental health first aiders are trained to sort of be supportive of that and respect that, but to continue to keep an eye on them and make sure that they're okay, and perhaps, signposting to their line manager or their HR teams to have a conversation with them if they continue to be worried.
Sorry, Karen, go on.
I was just going to say, so you'd like, what sort of level of training to be offered for people in the workplace, and who would do that training?
So we'd love there to be mental health first aiders in every workplace, but only as part of wider workplace legislation where employers really have to think about their overall holistic approach to mental health and well-being and the wider support that they can offer people when they're struggling as well. So we offer training to lots of people who want to become mental health first aiders. We work with over 20,000 workplaces who've trained with us and put mental health first aider networks in place. It's a 2-day course. They're trained on a range of things, from understanding what good mental health looks like, why some people have a higher prevalence of mental ill health, some of the mental health conditions and the signs that you may notice in someone if they are struggling around some of those conditions as well, and how to open up a safe and structured conversation that's very centred around the person and the support that they need to get them signposted to either help themselves or to signpost them to relevant professional services.
Isn't part of the problem as well, Sarah, that by its very definition, a lot of people are going to bottle up whatever it is that's causing the anxiety and the stress and the strains, and therefore how do your first aid practitioners unbottle it?
It can be really hard for some people who have got, bottled up concerns. I think there's a couple of things that workplaces and society generally can do is we need to remove the stigma around talking about mental health, and that contributes to people perhaps not wanting to be as open about their mental health with people. The good thing about our mental health first aiders is once they leave the workplace, they go home and they can talk to their friends, their family members, their people in their local community, and people that they might know a bit better and a little bit closer relationships with, and they can really open up powerful conversations that are life-changing and life-saving for those connections at home as well as in the workplace.
People might be concerned, of course, about their jobs, Sarah, and thinking, if I tell somebody at work that I'm not feeling great, when the next, round of people cuts come, maybe I'm going to be on the list.
Yeah, mental health first aiders are trained to be completely confidential. So discussions are confidential unless there's a risk of harm to an individual. Where obviously we would need to involve other people to protect them and protect them from harm. But yeah, it's confidential and people can kind of be anonymous with the information that they give as well.
OK, thank you, Sarah. Really interesting. Sarah McIntosh there, Director of Mental Health at First Aid. Gives you food for thought, doesn't it?
Does, actually.
Now, up next, we're going to be crossing over to Royal Ascot for racing's glitziest festival of the year. Don't look so excited, Andrew.
I don't think it's glitzy.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, a fine day today. There will be a few showers around, but many places won't see them and stay dry. Also, just a little bit of rain working its way up towards Kent, so we could see some rain here for a time, particularly later this morning. A scattering of showers already across Scotland, and one or two more developing through the day over northern England, perhaps Northern Ireland, maybe down into the Midlands. But I say they'll be somewhat hit and miss. Many places will stay dry, certainly across Wales and southwest England, dry and fine. And here 21, maybe 22 degrees Celsius. Cooler further north, temperatures struggling a little bit in the teens with the breeze still coming down from the north. Now the patchy rain across parts of Kent might just graze into parts of East Anglia, should scoot away through the afternoon. So turning brighter here to end the day. Still a few showers scattered across the Midlands, drifting south over northern England as well. Maybe the odd heavy one too. Parts of southern Scotland also susceptible to some heavy showers, but I suspect any showers over Northern Ireland fading pretty quickly. A cool feel though with that breeze across the Northern Isles. Temperatures only 10 or 11 Celsius at best through the afternoon. As we go through the evening and overnight, we should see the showers tending to fade away fairly rapidly through this evening. So some decent clear spells developing. Still a bit of a breeze, bringing a bit more cloud into East Anglia and potentially across into Kent also. But elsewhere, the wind's falling fairly light. Some mist and fog is possible. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across the north, double digits, certainly in urban areas further south to start tomorrow. And for most, tomorrow's looking like a fine day. It could start a bit cloudy over the southeast. The cloud will increase across the northwest. A bit of rain likely to trickle in here, but late in the day, again, a small chance of one or two showers, but most places will be fine tomorrow. Some lengthier spells of sunshine, feeling a bit warmer as well. The winds will be lighter and temperatures generally creeping up a little higher, or widely over 20 Celsius across the south. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our Summer Spectacular with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel. This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually it's about you. And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
She could have saved Storm.
you made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
.11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 18th of June. Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. So 85-year-old Sir Ian McKellen was rushed to hospital last night after falling off stage during a fight scene in the West End. He's expected to make a full recovery. We're going to be talking to an audience member to hear exactly what happened.
He's a great man, Ian McKellen. And Labour's banking hub. Labour is now pledging to bring banking back to high streets with a promise of 350 banking hubs over 5 years.
And sticking with that theme, contactless cards surge. The number of contactless cards in the UK has topped a milestone of 150 million. Do you use contactless, or are you still a fan of cash?
Yes, cash. Doctors are calling for the drink-drive limit to be cut to 1 beer or a single glass of wine. We're asking, isn't it now perhaps just time to ban booze behind the wheel altogether?
And Royal Ascot begins today. The glamorous racing festival is kicking off, and we've got a report looking at the ongoing drug problem at racing venues, which can ruin the atmosphere at the races. You don't want to miss that. It's a bit of a surprise. I think that drink driving story is very interesting and actually full of common sense. Just keep it simple. 1 small glass of wine or 1 pint of beer. Because it's the units. How many units is a glass of...
Exactly. And it also affects some people differently. I can remember I hadn't had a drink for a week. This is a few years ago. I got in the car, and I had 1 pint of beer, come out of the pub, and my lights weren't on, so the police stopped me. They breathalyzed me. I was nearly over the limit.
Really?
On 1 pint.
But had you had a meal?
No.
No, you see, and this is the thing, isn't it?
But I hadn't had any alcohol for a week, but I was nearly over the limit. So, but that's why I think sometimes it's just easy to say, don't have anything at all, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbnews.com/your say. First, though, the very latest headlines with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Labour says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 new hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. The party says it's part of a broader plan to revive Britain's high streets, which also includes cracking down on antisocial behaviour and support for small businesses. Consumer group Which says more than 6,000 branches have closed since 2015. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds told GB News the hubs will address the changing role of the high street.
By sharing the costs of that premise, that's obviously a much lower cost to them than their individual bank branches. And what you see a lot of at the minute is banks exiting high streets. They don't want to be the last bank left on the high street because they think that will put them into a position where they won't be able, they'll be under undue pressure to keep that bank branch open. By coming together, delivering it in that way, it reflects how things have changed, but it keeps that essential service in there. And of course, high streets and town centres are changing, but they're still a really important part of people's local economy, their sense of identity in a place. We've got to do more to make sure they're vibrant places, centres of civic life, and access to financial services and banking services is a really important part of that.
The Prime Minister will continue his election campaign in the southwest of England today, reaffirming an increase to the farming budget. It would see £1 billion dedicated to farming communities with a pledge to continue inheritance tax relief. The Conservatives are accusing Labour of having a secret plan to abolish the exemption after it wasn't included in the party's manifesto. Farming Minister Mark Spencer told GB News that tax relief is important for farmers.
One of those challenges that they face is how they then pass that down the generations without being overtaxed. So one of the commitments we're making is not to increase or to introduce inheritance tax on agricultural holdings, so that those farms, family farms, can be passed down the generation so they can carry on with their family expertise in producing food and managing our landscapes. And interesting that other political parties seem reluctant to rule out those sorts of tax increases to those family farms, and certainly we're calling on those other political parties, especially the Labour Party, to rule that out, and they seem reluctant to do that at this moment in time.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million a year to tackle sewage dumping by water companies. New water quality inspectors would work as part of the newly created Clean Water Authority, which would have powers to forcibly enter sites if water companies are too slow to grant permissions. The party's leader, Sir Ed Davies, says the companies have been allowed to mark their own homework, which he called a national scandal. Today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election, which takes place in about 2 weeks. A social media campaign is urging first-time voters to ensure they're on the electoral roll. Celebrities, including the actor Michael Sheen, have lent their voices to the call. Recent figures show voter turnout among 25 to 34-year-olds has dropped sharply below 60%, according to the Resolution Foundation. Around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote in elections. More of that breaking news that you've been hearing in the last half an hour. 3 young children are reported missing after they failed to return from a day out at Thorpe Park. Surrey police are looking for 14-year-old Candy, Amelia, who's 9, and Malik, who's 7. They were reported missing just after 7 o'clock last night. The 3 children were last seen walking towards Staines town centre just after 3:15 yesterday afternoon. Police believe they may have travelled to London. They're urging anyone with any information to contact them or Crime Stoppers. To North Korea now, where the Russian president is due to arrive for his first state visit in 24 years. Vladimir Putin travelled through the north of Russia early this morning, where he's due to continue his journey to Pyongyang. He'll hold a meeting with Kim Jong-un, who he's praised for firmly supporting the invasion of Ukraine. In a letter published by North Korea's state media, Mr. Putin promised to build trade and security system with the isolated country that are, quote, not controlled by the West. And Sir Ian McKellen is said to be in good spirits after he fell off the stage during a performance in London's West End last night. The 85-year-old acting veteran was performing a fight scene in Player Kings at the Noel Coward Theatre when he lost his footing and tumbled off the stage. The theatre was evacuated while Sir Ian was taken to hospital, but he is expected to be back on stage tomorrow in time for another matinee performance. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
11:07.
Finishing our biscuits, 11 o'clock.
Digestives, of course, plain, always plain, boring, but nice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, one of racing's biggest fixtures begins today, Royal Ascot, but with drug use, an ongoing problem. This isn't the athletes, we're talking about social drug use. Sports venues are working alongside police to try to keep them out.
So at the beginning of June, our very own Ray Addison went to the Epsom Derby Festival to investigate. This is what he found.
They call it the greatest show on turf, the thrill of the hill. But GB News can reveal, for some racegoers, the horses seemingly aren't enough, and they may be creating their own buzz.
You go in the men's toilets, you know what's going on. There's a bigger queue for the cubicles than there is for the urinals, you know. So it's happening, we all know it's happening.
Surprisingly, I have seen things that you think you wouldn't see, considering that there are sniffer dogs, so yes. Which is, it's just one of those things, unfortunately, doesn't it? You get lots of younger people that are apt to have a good time and they do it in different ways.
Following an article written for The Telegraph by former jockey and trainer Charlie Brooks, where he complained about an influx of young men attracted to the sport by the BBC's Peaky Blinders and subsequent indications of positive tests for cocaine by that newspaper at Aintree's Grand National, GB News decided to carry out our own tests over the two-day Derby Festival at Epsom Downs Racecourse. And we can reveal racing's drug problem is seemingly not just limited to cocaine. Using a surface wipe screening kit which tests for residue left by 10 individual drug groups, we found indications of the presence of several narcotics in Epsom's toilets. Although cocaine was the most prevalent Class A which appeared to be present, our tests also indicated the presence of crystal meth, both drugs with a possible penalty of up to 7 years in prison for their possession. Benzodiazepines, or benzos, also appeared to be present, an opioid often associated with cases of drink spiking and date rape. And we also found indications of drugs used to stave off withdrawal from drugs such as heroin. Buprenorphine was the most common, along with methadone. Although tests like this can only provide at best a preliminary analytical result, 47% indicated at least one controlled substance. Despite our findings, Surrey and Sussex police forces say they arrested just one person for suspected Class A drug possession across the two-day event, suggesting much more needs to be done. A spokesperson for the Jockey Club, which operates Epsom, Aintree and Cheltenham racecourses, said, "We at the Jockey Club are passionate about providing safe and enjoyable experiences for all those who visit our venues, and tens of thousands of people who joined us over the 2 days at Epsom Downs did so while behaving in a considerate and responsible manner. Unfortunately, drug use is an increasing societal problem, and this is something horse racing in Britain has been working hard to combat, with the Jockey Club taking a zero-tolerance approach to illegal substances across all of our racecourses." A range of measures were put in place at Epsom Downs, including detection dogs, bag searches and pat-downs in operation at all entrances, as well as amnesty bins. Anyone found to be attempting to access the site in possession of illegal substances was denied entry and given no refund on their ticket purchases, with such instances also reported to the police. In addition, we would always urge anyone who has reason to suspect any form of antisocial behaviour to contact our teams or police on site as soon as possible. Despite what our findings indicate, there is absolutely no suggestion that any of the people we filmed for this report were doing anything at all illegal or wrong.
It's a wider spread issue. It's not the normal racegoers. If you come to Epsom in 2 months' time, not on Derby Day, it'll be completely different. It's the social side of things which it's going to happen. We just have to know how to deal with it. And it's not the majority. That's what I want to express. It's not the majority. It's the minority.
Ray Addison, GB News.
Well, I thought I'd heard it all.
I know. It's the middle-class drug problem.
Oh, sure.
You know, when we talk about kind of drug issues, gangs...
Oh, yeah, I would say it's
the users.
It's the people in Islington, dinner parties, taking cocaine, who are keeping the gangs in our inner cities, who often end up being shot and knifed.
Yeah.
They're keeping them in business.
Totally.
But I'd never thought of it at racing. I don't go to horse racing very often, but I've never noticed, I've got to say, a sniffer dog.
No.
They must be there.
Well, they clearly are. Extraordinary. Well done, Ray. Great report, that, Ray Addison.
Yeah. Well, we're going to Ascot, where better, of course, because it is the glamorous Ascot Festival. It's not glitzy at all. To our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's looking very, very formal in your top hat
very dapper,
and tails. Cameron, a big day today. Ascot very popular with the royals, which is why I assume you're there.
Thank you both. Yes, it certainly is extremely popular with the royals, started by Queen Anne in the 1700s. I've got the official day one programme in my hand, and in it, the King and Queen have written a message for the 47,000 estimated guests for day one of Ascot. In it, they welcome all the guests, of course, to the area and look forward to rerunning the King Charles III Stakes. Now, that's been renamed because it was formerly known as the King's Stand Stakes, but with the King's permission, that has changed change. That's a Group 1 5-furlong sprint run that's happening today on the first day of Royal Ascot. He also spoke about Ascot sustainability, as you could probably expect with King Charles and the net zero village enclosure. The Royal Drawing School here for the first time. That's a charity King Charles set up back in 2000 when he was Prince of Wales, trying to champion drawing. They've done some equine-related artwork, which is going to be on display in the Royal Enclosure, and also spoke of the immense pleasure and joy of the King and Queen's horse, Desert Hero, winning last year. Now, you may remember those fantastic images from the Royal Box, where I think the King and Queen probably thought that, forgot that they were on camera. They were so excited that their horse was winning. It was bred by Queen Elizabeth II, who, of course, won over 20 races during her long reign when she attended Royal Ascot. Desert Hero running again on Saturday, but Water, their other horse, is the one to watch because it has the same trainer and the same jockey that Desert Hero had last year. Now, earlier I spoke to Nick Smith. He's Royal Ascot's Director of Racing and Public Affairs. He spoke about the tradition of Ascot as well as why the King and Queen find it just so exciting.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you so much. You do look fabulous there. What a sunny day as well.
Lovely. Great day for it. And I suspect we're going to see the King there. If there's a Charles III, King Charles III stakes, as Piers Pottinger said, he knows everything about horse racing. Must ask him about the drug taking that's going on there.
Yeah.
Not suggesting he was anything to do with it, but he would know.
Yeah, what a revelation. Right. Let's go now to the Liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, who's been speaking to reporters in Hampshire. Here he is.
Near enough sewage monitors, we call them sewage busters. We want to provide £10 million in our costs manifesto, so our new regulator, the Clean Water Authority, has the resources, because we do need a tough regulator, as we're proposing, with powers coming from other regulators, so we have a much stronger regulator, but they need the resources to do the job. And we've seen on the Conservatives cutting back the Environment Agency, where some of these monitors were, and we want to make sure the resources are there as well as the rules.
It seems that Rishi Sunak and Grant Shapps think that the Tories won't win this election, and that they're just trying to kind of limit a Labour supermajority. Are you worried about a Labour supermajority?
My job is to make sure we beat as many Conservative MPs as possible, and SNP MPs in Scotland. Liberal Democrats, I think, are getting our messages over in this campaign on health and care, on sewage, we've just been talking about, and on the economy. And the more Liberal Democrat MPs we have, the better. The truth is the Conservative Party have failed in government. They'd fail in opposition. They're a divider party, and I think the Liberal Democrats could be very important in the next Parliament.
You know, you slam the Tory party.
So that's the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey. Of course, they've been making a big issue, and with some justification, I would say, about the levels of pollution in our rivers. They've pretty much owned that as an issue.
Good.
Actually, and
Somebody
they've done well on it. And I know he's looked a complete clown, hurling himself in and out of water just about but it's getting him on the news bulletins, and the point he's making is the water levels, pollution levels are unacceptable.
Totally.
Shame on the water companies and the fat cat directors and their huge bonuses.
Yeah. Right, still to come this morning, doctors are calling for the drink drive limit in England to be cut to 1 beer or a small glass of wine. Would that simplification make it easier, do you think, to still enjoy a drink, but also drive without the risk of harming someone? That's next on Britain's Newsroom. Don't go anywhere.
It's midday. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life.
We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, you know, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. You know, make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. You know, if you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programs like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you know, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
(11:20) Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. The panel's back. Former Labour MP Luciana Berger, political commentator Piers Pottinger. Piers, we took that. Bev and I were fascinated by that stuff about from Ray Addison at Epsom. Now, you've been a racing man for years, and I know you actually ran a race.
Well, I was a director of a racecourse group, Northern Racing, which was headed by the great Stan Clark, the late great man. And he stood no nonsense on racecourses. And we had people who would go into the lavatories, and if they saw any evidence of drug taking, they'd physically remove the people and take them straight to the police. And that's what you have to do.
So this has been going on for a while?
I'm afraid so. And it's, I mean, like anywhere where there's booze and entertainment, any nightclub in London, when you go into any lavatory, there's going to be someone.
But I think we're just terribly naive, you and I. I think we're very naive, Andrew, you and I.
I've never
does it surprise you, Luciana? Because you were obviously in Liverpool for a while.
You were at
Aintree.
Yeah.
I've been to Aintree, but I've been to lots of other racecourses and certainly saw signs of.
Did you? I just assumed people were drunk.
No, you know, there's more to do. I mean, it's not just about.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some. I mean, I remember being at Ascot before, and these women on these huge heels, staggering and falling, and I just assumed it was booze. Perhaps it was drugs.
Which they possibly are. I guess it's this sort of high-rolling, risk-taking behaviour, isn't it? A lot of people are there to gamble and. Yeah. And I guess it comes with the territory, but yeah, revelation for me.
I just go to have a nice day out and I pick the horse on the basis I think the horse looks nice.
I go on the basis of the name.
Yeah, or the name, or I like the jockey's colour of shirt or something. Piers is the great expert, so I am going on Saturday, and you're going to give me some tips.
To have owned a horse that won at Royal Ascot.
Oh, wow.
Did it really?
And in fact, still. I hold the record. He's the oldest horse ever to win at Royal Ascot. He was 12 years old.
Good Lord.
Caracciolo, he won the Queen Alexandra and trained, ironically, by Nicky Henderson, who's much more known as a jumps trainer.
Right.
But
how exciting is it to win a race at Ascot?
It was wonderful, yeah, at Royal Ascot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a marvellous day.
Because we saw that image of
family there.
We saw the image of the King and Queen Camilla last year, really getting excited because the late Queen's horse was winning.
There's no thrill to match it, in my view.
Really?
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right, Luciana, can we talk about Keir Starmer wanting votes at 16 to entrench his power for years, according to the Mail? Is that his motivation?
Well, this has been a campaign running for many, many years. I've been involved in the campaign for votes at 16 for well over a decade. And there's certainly been a grassroots movement, largely driven by young people themselves. You know, young people in this country from the age of 16 pay tax. They've arguably got the greatest stake in our future, and they should have a say in who governs this country. And I think it would be a really positive change, also to bring us in line with the changes that we've seen to national elections in both Scotland and Wales.
But did many 16-year-olds vote when the vote was extended to them in Scotland? I don't think many of them bothered with it, did they? Is that the evidence?
I can't say I've looked at the evidence specifically in those elections, but certainly when you speak to young people, and I've done many a talk in a college, a FE college, or to a sixth form, young people want to express that vote. And if they're paying tax, from the age of 16, if they're working, then they should have a say in how that money's spent.
I have to say, I think this is a good idea. I mean, my middle child is 15 now, and she's just at that age, Piers, where she wants to talk about the election, and she's got questions about the political parties. And I think unless we get kids engaged at that age, by the time they get to 18, that sometimes they're at uni or they're at work and their interest is gone. We need to grab them, don't we, into the political sphere?
Well, I'm all for educating them and engaging them in democracy and politics and understanding how the world goes. But at 16, you can't, for example, buy a lottery ticket. No. You can't buy a drink in a pub. You can't drive a car. I'm sorry, I think 16 is far too young to give the vote. I mean, obviously, the Labour Party think that the young will vote for them more naturally than they would the Conservatives, and that's why they're doing it. And in fact, when you look at their manifesto, an awful lot of stuff they've got there is to try and nail them. Their whole manifesto is about them and power. They just want power. They've got no real vision for Britain. They've got no real principles. They're dodging all the questions about tax.
We'll bring you in, don't worry. We'll bring you back in.
Penalising people because they hate success. And what they want to do is keep themselves in power for as long as possible.
Well, Luciana Berger, they wouldn't be the first political parties that would want to stay in power for as long as possible.
Well, and we're having this conversation after 14 years of a Conservative government, and a Conservative government that is ensured that this generation is not going to do what's happened to previous generations. We've now got a generation of young people who are not going to do as well as their predecessors. And I think that's a problem. I think that any government that comes into office should leave a legacy that's better than what they inherited, and that is not the case in terms of what this country finds at this moment in time.
Is that partly because of what happened in COVID and all those kids who lost so much important education?
I think there's very many things that we can point to in terms of whether it's the number of young people who are not in education, employment or training in this country, the challenges that we see, again, the kind of cost of living, opportunities to get on the housing ladder. You know, we've got one of the oldest ages of the average age of people owning a home in this country compared to other nations and countries. That should concern us all. So to have a vision where actually this generation should do at least as well, if not better, than the one before it, I think is really, really important and is an aspiration for this country.
Do you think they'll actually do it, though, Luciana? Because isn't there far more important things for Keir Starmer to be getting on with, like getting the NHS sorted out, getting our prisons sorted out, law and order?
You can have a really ambitious programme for government in the first year, which the Labour Party has set out, which is great. It's not either or. You can do both at the same time. Absolutely, we need to tackle the NHS, but this has been a long-term commitment, not just from Keir Starmer, from many others, myself included, that have campaigned for this within the Labour Party. And I do think, we've seen a story earlier on this channel about how we need to encourage people to vote. We've got the deadline, because we've seen fewer younger people participate in elections. I think we should be doing everything possible to engage them in our democratic process. And I come back to the point, if you are working at 16 and you're paying tax at 16, from the age of 16, you should have a say in how that money is spent. So I think it's absolutely...
And I think it's a bit of a... I genuinely think it's a myth that young people are more inclined to vote Labour now. If you look at Nigel Farage going around with his enormous TikTok following, having been on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, there's a young generation who are much more politically right-minded.
Well, terrific. Yeah. I mean, that's encouraging. But, the Labour Party... on the one hand, they talk about education, yet they're trying to penalise middle-class people who've saved money to send their children to decent, really good schools. And a lot of public schools, or private schools, if you want to call them that, are actually excellent schools. And to deprive people of sending their children there, which should be their right of choice. After all, they pay tax anyway. They're paying these fees out of taxed income.
On that issue, that story's moved on a little bit, Luciana. Let me just tell you, because what's happening now in a lot of private schools is the heads are going to the parents and saying, if you want to pay your fees up front now, you can avoid the 20% VAT. You can pay your fees for 10 years. And this is what we've always said, the super, super rich who can just access that sort of money are going to get around this tax.
Yeah, it's not going to be the mums and dads from Eton, is it?
Well, I actually had some parents raise this with me the other day, and they told me actually their school said that they couldn't do that. So, and that they've been advised by HMRC.
Oh, they're doing that.
Office that they if they were to do that, they'd be penalised. So I'm unclear of kind of exactly what the rules are, but I'm concerned about how all children in this country should have a good education, and over 93% of children in this country do not go to a private school.
That's not all children, though. That's 93%.
No, I'm saying, and we've got an issue where we don't have enough maths teachers, and actually, you know, making sure that we do fully fund and we have 6,500 extra teachers in our school will make a massive difference to the levels of education and aspiration, which we were talking about.
But your colleague
ago.
Emily Thornbury, your ex-colleague Emily Thornbury, when you were in the House, she let the cat out of the bag, didn't she? When she conceded, of course, it is going to mean, certainly in the short term to medium term, we're going to have bigger state classes because 40,000 kids probably are going to be taken out of private schools because mum and dad can't afford it. Well, where are you going to educate them?
We know that we've got a
Where are you going to educate them?
We know that
doesn't help a 14-year-old, does it? A falling birth rate.
I'm answering your question. We've had a falling birth rate, which means we've got plenty of schools.
Not good schools.
We've got plenty of schools that have got capacity in this country. That is absolutely the case. We've got vacant classrooms. We've got schools that are struggling to meet their roles in terms of making sure that they've got full classrooms. So there's a job to be done.
But that's saying those 660,000 children who are currently in private school, well, we'll just change your life and we'll just move you into a school that has spaces, which is probably an underperforming school.
Yeah, almost certainly.
It's callous.
But there's a few things. I'm challenging the idea that there isn't capacity. There is capacity. There's a separate
in the rubbish schools. There's capacity.
There's a separate issue. You know, we've heard a lot of concerns raised by the private schools themselves, but they have consistently and constantly, for more than a decade, increased their prices by way above inflation. So they were prepared to do that, and people were paying it. And all of a sudden now,
20% in one go is a huge amount compared to 3% in a year.
You've got
and
two
it's
kids.
Pure spite. I mean, there's no other reason for it.
There's no
logic. Ideology other than a sort of communist, or we'll just shove all the children like cattle into just schools. There's no question about the quality of education here. I mean, you were at a private school. You were educated at a private school. So was I. And it was the quality of the education that's why my parents, who saved and went through quite a lot of personal sacrifice to afford the fees even then. And, you know, the point is, and I'm very grateful I went to my school.
But fees today in private schools are way, way, way above. They're not in any way comparable to the fees that were paid 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I was with actually a head teacher from a non-state school only last night. It was really, really interesting hearing from her. She has taken students from these private schools and said that they have had to catch up because the level of education in her school is better.
Well, your private school didn't do you too badly, did it?
Which is probably true, but it's still the parents' choice. It's still the Labour Party taking away choice and saying, we know what's best for your children. That's what worries me.
We've run out of time.
Right, Luciana Berger, Piers Pottinger, brilliant to have you here this morning. Right, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you and good morning. The top stories. 3 young children are reported missing after they failed to return from a day out at Thorpe Park. Surrey police are looking for 14-year-old Candy Amelia, who's 9, and 14-year-old Candy, 9-year-old Amelia and Malik, who's 7. They were reported missing just after 7 o'clock last night. The 3 children were last seen walking towards Staines town centre just after 3:15 yesterday afternoon. Police believe they may have travelled to London. They're urging anyone with information to contact them or Crime Stoppers. Labour says it'll bring face-to-face banking back to the high streets with 350 new banking hubs in towns and villages. It would see staff from several banks sharing the same space, helping fill gaps left by branch closures. The Prime Minister will continue his election campaign in the southwest of England today, reaffirming an increase to the farming budget. It would see £1 billion dedicated to farming communities with a pledge to continue inheritance tax relief. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are promising to spend £10 million a year to tackle sewage dumping by water companies. New quality inspectors would work as part of a newly created Clean Water Authority. Sir Ed Davies says it's crucial that Britain's water is cleaned up.
There's nowhere near enough sewage monitors. We call them sewage busters. We want to provide £10 million in our cost manifesto, so our new regulator, the Clean Water Authority, has the resources, because we do need a tough regulator, as we're proposing, with powers coming from other regulators, so we have a much stronger regulator, but they need the resources to do the job. And we've seen on the Conservatives cutting back the Environment Agency, where some of these monitors were, and we want to make sure the resources are there as well as the rules.
And today is the last day to register to vote in the upcoming general election, which takes place in just over 2 weeks' time. A social media campaign is urging first-time voters to ensure they're on the electoral roll. Figures from the Resolution Foundation show turnout among younger voters has dropped sharply below 60%, while around 8 million people are estimated to be unregistered to vote. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2683 and €1.1834. The price of gold is £1,822.88 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,172 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Being roped
up at noon. Good afternoon, Britain, with Tom and Emily. Here they are.
Sorry, I was just chatting away, Bev. How rude.
What's on the show?
We always do this.
Boris Johnson.
Every single week.
We have a lot to talk
We're always just
about.
talking and the camera cuts to us. We could be saying anything.
Oh, don't tempt fate there, Tom. So Boris Johnson, it looks like he's being roped back in to the campaign. Now, he's been holidaying in Sardinia with his family and brood.
Yeah.
He's still there, but they're going to be using him on their campaign literature in those seats where people backed him previously.
Do you think they'll get him out on the campaign trail? Because that's what you want, don't you? Boris, the best campaigner the Tories have got, who will make Rishi look like an amateur.
Well,
frankly.
isn't that the problem? Because
Sure
I
it is.
remember back in 2017, when Boris was Theresa May's foreign secretary.
Yeah.
He wasn't allowed to do any of the media.
Right.
She kept him back from the campaign because she wanted it to be her victory. Do you remember? She was going to win a 200-seat majority.
Yeah,
it was going to be the biggest Tory majority in generations. But, of course, in the final week of the campaign, there'd been a couple of polls that had showed hung Parliament territory. People forget those, but there were polls showing it by the end of the campaign. And suddenly Boris Johnson was wheeled out to do media,
Wheel him out.
to do sort of debate spin room stuff.
It was too late.
That was, but by the end, it was the last week of the campaign. It was all too late.
Yeah.
Thing is, do people want Boris back?
No.
Is he a vote winner?
No.
Has he let, Conservatives down?
Yes.
Voted for him?
But is Rishi Sunak a vote winner?
Well,
Are
that's
any
the
of them a vote
question.
winner?
Would Boris
On the
Johnson
Tory
add
side.
to the votes, or would it make no difference at all, or would it actually lose votes?
I think they'll be thinking in some of the red wall seats he will help.
I think it's the same appeal as Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
We've been looking at the sort of viral moments of Nigel Farage where he just doesn't really care about what people think about him. And he's willing to sort of say non-politically correct things. He has a laugh with the audience. He's an engaging public speaker. And if we sort of step aside from policy and the management of the office of the Prime Minister and everything else, I think there is something in politicians being able to be relatable and enigmatic.
Well, perhaps it can't hurt. Perhaps it can't hurt.
well,
If you
how
reach a
could
few
it?
more voters through Boris Johnson,
exactly.
then,
Look
but
at
whether
the polls.
he'd want to, would he want to? I mean, lots of people say,
Well,
Rishi Sunak stabbed him in the back.
If it shows him again in a very positive light and crowds flock to see him, it shows Boris has still got drawing power.
Have you all forgotten the pandemic? Have you more
many people won't
forgotten.
have. Many people won't have.
That's the thing. People, regardless of where you sat in that, if you thought we needed more lockdowns, you crossed with Boris Johnson because of Partygate.
Well, you'd be crosser
if
with
you're
that.
on my side of the fence, you cross with him because he's locked you up in your house, so he doesn't please anyone.
You see a man who, through an unprecedented crisis, tried to keep the UK open as much as possible, actually resisted pressure, and that's... Do you remember there was going to be a fourth lockdown? Keir Starmer called for it. There was going to be no Freedom Day.
Right.
He pushed against all of the institutional weight to make sure that we could open despite Omicron. I mean, there were some big moments there where big calls were made.
Well, and Labour are getting away scot-free on that issue.
Yeah.
Everybody's also forgiving Labour the fact that they cheered it all on and they wanted more schools closed and they wanted more people
and
to
Wales,
stay at home.
It was most draconian part of the United Kingdom was Labour-controlled Wales.
Right, Emily and Tom will be here from midday, and we're going to be talking in just a moment to an audience member who saw Ian McKellen fall off the stage last night. Stay here to find out what happened. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Helen Worth, who of course plays Gail Platt in Coronation Street, is going to leave the soap after an epic 50 years. I'm joined now by another Corrie legend, Charlie Lawson, whose character, of course, Jim McDonald, lived across the cobbles from Gail Platt for many years. Welcome to the show, Charlie. I can see you looking at those images there, and it has to be said, fantastic acting. In 50 years, many of us just grew up with these characters and basically think they're part of our family. Can you shed light on some of your happy memories of the talent of Helen Worth?
We saw each other every day. She was a consummate professional and still is. This initially surprised me, but then I thought about it, and I'm frankly not surprised. Having spoken to certain senior members of the cast over the last period of time, you know, when Helen joined, or even when I joined, there was a cast of 25. I would put another 75 on that now, perhaps. It's a different animal now, totally, you know, 4, 5, 6 episodes a week. When Helen started, it would have been 2. She lives in London. She's not getting any younger. And she's done 50 years, for God's sake. Nobody can ask any more of that. And listen, Helen, look at that wee smile. God bless you, darling. I hope you have a great retirement. The trouble with actors is that we very, very rarely hang our boots up unless the bank balance is full, which it very seldom is. But also, we live for attention. And when you're in the most famous program on the planet, that attention 9 times out of 10 is an extremely good experience.
The People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
10:41 with Britain's Newsroom. It's 11:41 actually on GB News with Andrew Pearson.
Nearly.
There's a lot of noise in the gallery.
You wish we had another hour here.
What are they
don't
doing
you?
in that gallery? Can you hear all that racket going on in there?
Anyway, this is a serious story, but I'm glad we've got an eyewitness. Ian McKellen was taken to hospital last night. He fell off a stage during a performance of Player Kings at the Noel Coward Theatre in London.
He's 85. He is remarkable. He's playing full staff. He's on stage for the best part of 3 hours.
Full staff. He was playing the right character, wasn't he?
Yeah, but how would you remember the words for 3 hours? Apparently he's in good spirits, making a speedy recovery and could even be back on stage tomorrow. Joining us now is Charlie Johnson, who was actually there at the Noel Coward Theatre last night and can tell us what happened. Good morning, Charlie. Look, I speak as a huge fan of Sir Ian McKellen. I've known him for a very long time through all his work for Stonewall and gay equal rights for gay people and stuff, but he's a brilliant actor and quite a commanding performance on that stage.
Oh, he's a fantastic actor, and like you say, he's an icon both on and off the stage. I mean, his work for Stonewall and LGBT causes, in addition to the fact that, you know, for someone my age, I pretty much grew up on Lord of the Rings and X-Men, you know, Gandalf, and of course, you know, his acting repertoire stretches far more than that, you know, on both stage and on film. So yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing him, and you know, even more shocked when he fell off.
What happened,
Yeah,
Charlie?
what
What happened? How far through the play was it?
It was almost at the interval, so I don't know how well you know Henry IV, but Hal was fighting Henry Percy, and there were sort of strobe lights going off, and it all went black for a second, and you can kind of see the silhouette of a very fat Ian McKellen playing Falstaff coming out from the wings, at which point, on the stage, there was sort of a step down just as the stage meets the audience. And I think what happened was he sort of misplaced his foot, lost his balance, and pretty much, I mean, what it looked like from my angle, and I was sitting on the front row just to the right of where he fell off, he sort of dove head first, landed on an audience member, and within seconds, you know, was screaming in agony.
Oh, dear.
So he landed on a member of the audience in the front row?
That's what it looked like from my angle.
But that presumably,
so
Charlie, broke his fall. But that would have helped break his fall, I imagine.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Ironically. And so the production was then presumably cancelled very quickly, and did they manage to walk him out of the theatre, or did he have to go out on a stretcher?
I didn't see him exit the theatre, but we were told within 10 minutes that he was being sent to hospital. There was an ambulance coming. And because it was quite busy on the street at the main entrance, I think he was whisked away at the back. So I didn't manage to catch a glimpse of him actually leaving.
So, Charlie, just go back a bit. So he falls off the stage, he lands on the lap of somebody on the front row. Presumably the house lights go up, and then what?
Well, it was sort of a moment of confusion. You know, I wasn't sure if it was part of the play. I wasn't sure if, you know, he was breaking the fourth wall or anything like that. You see a lot of that in theatre these days. Yeah, just a lot of confusion. I thought that maybe, you know, he was going to get up and get back on stage. But, I mean, within seconds, he was screaming. He was screaming, "Help me. My arm, help me."
Oh, dear.
In a way that I've sort of never heard anyone say before. So it was difficult, obviously, to hear that and to hear it happen and see it happen to such a fantastic person.
Yeah.
Was he wasn't bleeding or anything? From what you could tell, did these assistants come to take him backstage?
Yeah, I mean, within the first 10 seconds, we were ushered out. The first two rows were ushered out really quickly, and then within 30 seconds, the rest of the auditorium was emptied out. So I didn't really manage to catch more of them other than the initial fall.
Must have been very distressing, Charlie. Must have been very distressing to hear Sir Ian McKellen, a man of 85 who's clearly in a lot of pain.
Yeah, exactly. And as we were leaving, people were crying, people were in tears, because people had come, you know, probably across the world to come and see him act in this play, and clearly looked up to him. So to see that happen to someone that they admire, someone they look up to, someone who's a fantastic person.
Well, he's the reason,
and campaigner. You know, it was shocking.
Charlie, you were there, I presume, for one reason, to see Sir Ian McKellen.
Yeah, I mean, I was there because my aunt dragged me along.
Oh, right.
What was the reaction, Charlie? What was the reaction from the other cast members?
I think they were kind of in disbelief as well. They did sort of help him pretty quickly. there was a cluster of actors around him on the stage, and I think they got off stage and were helping him, but it was mainly the ushers. And I believe there were 2 members of the audience who were doctors who also came and performed first aid on scene.
And just the one thing I think we haven't mentioned, how far was the fall? How high was the edge of the stage from the front row?
I mean, it's quite high. Probably around 3 feet, something like that.
It's a long way to go.
It is, head first.
Particularly when you're 85.
Exactly. But I think it was a good thing initially that he was so vocal. That meant, he hadn't.
Yes, of course.
His head or something.
Yeah, and he wasn't
that.
unconscious.
Yeah.
Well, look, thanks for sharing that. And maybe the rumour is, Charlie, he's going to be back on stage as early as tomorrow. Maybe you can get back in there and see the end of the show.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I was really enjoying it. So, yeah, I think I might take them up on that offer.
All right, Charlie. That's
Thank
Charlie
you.
Johnson. He was at the No Crowd Theatre. Just to remind you again, he is remarkable. He goes to the theatre every day on a back of a motorbike, pillion passage.
Amazing.
15 minutes.
Amazing.
At the age
85.
of 85. He's extraordinary.
Right, up next, the Paris sport athlete and MasterChef winner, Kadina Cox, OBE, is joining us to look ahead to the Olympics and Paralympics in Paris. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should be another mostly dry day with some further sunny spells today, but there is a thunderstorm risk for some of us, particularly across northern areas of the UK. That's where low pressure is closer to, but actually high pressure is building in from the south and west. There is a weather front, though, approaching from the southeast. That could bring some light rain just to the likes of Kent through this afternoon, but I think most of it should stay away to the continent. But there is this thunderstorm risk, particularly across northern areas of England and down towards the Midlands as well. We could see up to 20 millimetres falling in a short space of time, and a risk of hail as well. So it's a bit cooler today. We've got a northerly wind across parts of Scotland and a bit more cloud around compared to yesterday. It will cloud over through this afternoon after a fairly bright start to the day, and that thunderstorm risk is going to continue into this evening as well. So this northerly wind across Scotland means temperatures are only about 10 or 11 degrees at best here, and there will be some drizzly rain across the Northern Isles, but it's the heaviest rain that's likely across northwestern areas of England. As I said, we could see 20 millimetres of rain. There's a risk of hail, lightning as well, but it should stay dry and bright for many southern areas, and in the sunshine it's still feeling fairly warm with quite light winds through today. Now, overnight tonight, things will dry out. The thunderstorms will ease, so for many of us it will be a clear and dry night with plenty of clear skies developing. And it will be a slightly fresher start tomorrow, particularly for parts of the northwest. We could see a rural grass frost, but for most of us, we'll be at around 10 degrees to start the day. And there will be more brightness on the way for Wednesday. Wednesday's actually looking like a drier day on the whole, more widely across the UK. There is a weather front approaching from the northwest through the day, and that will bring cloudier skies to the Western Isles, the Highlands of Scotland and the Northern Isles, perhaps parts of Northern Ireland later on in the day. But for most of us, dry, bright and feeling fairly warm in the sunshine, temperatures climbing towards 23 degrees.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, 11:51. It's not just the Euros this summer of sport. We've got the Olympics and Paralympics to look forward to in Paris,
well,
of course.
They'll be more interesting than the Euros.
Well, they will. Well, joining us now is Paralympian Kadina Cox, OBE, who competes in the T38 para-athletic sprint events and also paracycling. Kadina, but as well, you're the winner of Celebrity MasterChef, and you want to talk to us today about being a bit more adventurous with our healthy cooking. What tips can we take from you?
I just say just branch out, grab different fruits and veggies that you wouldn't normally grab like, different like cuts of meat, like, that's not the norm, like the standard, just like a little bit of beef and a little bit of lamb, or some cod, like, cod and salmon are overfished. Like, let's go for different fishes, have a little bit of mackerel, which is a good oily fish, make sure you're getting the veggies in, play around with different, foods, like, you could have a little bit of Thai food this week, a little bit of Mexican, like, you can mix it up. I've been making sushi, which is, really good, like, because there was some research done by Utaka that found that, like 85% of us, I think, we're not creative. We have the same thing all the time. So I think, you just got to branch out and just have something a little bit different.
Is it also for you, Kadina, as an athlete, food is fuel? So you can get into really boring, like having to eat loads of calories and not really making any effort with it.
Yeah, no, it can be very, very monotonous. And, like, for me, like, I've got to make sure that I've got the right fuel to be able to train, because if I don't train well, then I'm not going to perform well. And also, like, if I'm recovering from any injury or if I'm trying to avoid illness, I've got to make sure, I'm having, like, the right food to make sure, like, my immune system's good. And it can get pretty samey and boring. And I'll be honest, like, when you're this close to, like, the Olympics or Paralympics, you are very, like, careful, and you do, like, have the same things, like, over and over. Like, I'll have the same, like, salmon dish, like, every week, and, the same chicken dish. But, like, you can still be a little bit adventurous, put a different sauce in it, like, add, like, a little bit of different seasoning, try different veggies. I get a fruit and veg box that sends me different fruits that I would never, like, necessarily have, and that makes me, branch out, have different vegetables, and, I don't know, like, I don't really like courgettes, but, I've started eating courgettes, like, to save off with different things, and different kale, though.
Kadina, we've run out of time, but will you come back and talk to us nearer the Olympics, please, and tell us how we're going to do? Kadina Cox, OBE, there, giving us some cooking tips. And you see, if you cook better, you can end up being an Olympic athlete, Andrew Pearce. That's where you've gone wrong.
I don't think I could ever be an Olympic athlete on a bike.
High jump.
Really arduous. She's a great inspiration, isn't she?
She's brilliant. She's brilliant. Right,
courgettes, by the way, are very nice. We do lots with courgettes.
We're done for the day. We have been.
Well, that's made
Bev
Tom
Turner and Andrew Pearce. Emily and Tom are here with Good Afternoon Britain. Have a lovely day.
We are here. Could we be about to see a whole lot more of Mr. Boris Johnson? Rumours are, he's on holiday at the moment, but rumours are that he could be making a return to the campaign, trying to get some of those reform votes, perhaps?
And stick with us, because during the show we'll be breaking the very latest number of small boat crossings. You'll be shocked.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, a fine day today. There will be a few showers around, but many places won't see them and stay dry. Also, just a little bit of rain working its way up towards Kent, so we could see some rain here for a time, particularly later this morning. A scattering of showers already across Scotland, and one or two more developing through the day over northern England, perhaps Northern Ireland, maybe down into the Midlands. But I say they'll be somewhat hit and miss. Many places will stay dry. Certainly across Wales and southwest England, dry and fine. And here, 21, maybe 22 degrees Celsius. Cooler further north. Temperatures struggling a little bit in the teens, with the breeze still coming down from the north. Now, the patchy rain across parts of Kent might just graze into parts of East Anglia. Should scoot away through the afternoon. So turning brighter here to end the day. Still a few showers scattered across the Midlands, drifting south over northern England as well. Maybe the odd heavy one too. Parts of southern Scotland also susceptible to some heavy showers, but I suspect any showers over Northern Ireland fading pretty quickly. A cool feel though with that breeze across the Northern Isles. Temperatures only 10 or 11 Celsius at best through the afternoon. As we go through the evening and overnight, we should see the showers tending to fade away fairly rapidly through this evening. So some decent clear spells developing. Still a bit of a breeze, bringing a bit more cloud into East Anglia and potentially across into Kent also. But elsewhere, the winds falling fairly light. Some mist and fog is possible. Temperatures will dip down to single figures across the north, double digits, certainly in urban areas further south to start tomorrow. And for most, tomorrow's looking like a fine day. It could start a bit cloudy over the southeast. The cloud will increase across the northwest. A bit of rain likely to trickle in here, but late in the day, again, a small chance of one or two showers, but most places will be fine tomorrow. Some lengthier spells of sunshine, feeling a bit warmer as well. The winds will be lighter and temperatures generally creeping up a little higher, more widely over 20 Celsius across the south. Goodbye.
warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win our Summer Spectacular and